Hey, everybody, welcome to Movies We're Talking About, where we talk and talk and talk about movies. I'm John Carlos, and today I am joined once again by actor, comedian extraordinaire, and host of The Con Guy, Ben Kliewer.
What up, everybody? It's me, old buddy Ben. I'm so stoked to be here once again with John Carlos and talking about movies that are worth talking about and talking and talking and talking. Last time I was here, we did Temple of Doom,
We
one
did.
of my favorites. I'm super stoked about that episode, and we talked so much about Temple of Doom. It was great. And today's another one of my favorites. I know it's one that you and I have connected on a lot,
Mhm.
and this one holds a special place to me. So I'm excited to get into it and talk with you about it.
Me too, because we've joked about it, we've quoted it, never really talked about it. I just realized the intro should have been the J to my Silent Bob because we cosplay Jay and Silent Bob together.
We do. We haven't in a while. We need to bust that back
Yeah.
out again. I still got everything.
Yeah, we did two cons. Yeah, I still have everything too. And now I have my own beard.
There you go.
I for pre-pandemic, I never really, not like I have a heavy beard, folks, but I have a beard. I used to have to draw it on,
Yeah.
and now it's realsies. But yeah, no, this whole year is the 30th anniversary of Clerks slash The World Getting Jay and Silent Bob. So I'm going through all the Kevin Smith films this year, and not only does that mean going through all the movies, but specifically for this, came out in '99, so this is the 25th anniversary of Dogma. So it's got its own celebration, which also means the shirt I'm wearing is 25 years old.
Hey, it looks good for its age.
Yeah, it's yeah, whatever. I used to wear it a lot, and then I haven't worn it in like 20, 18 years, and I found it recently. I'm like, fuck yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I'm all ready to go. I got my movies cup and my movie
Ooh.
cereal, and
Yeah, you've got quite
ready to
the
rock.
menagerie back there.
Yeah, I like to make it fun behind me. I've got a Dogma on the special edition DVD and the Blu-ray, both of which are out of print and very popular on eBay and very sought
Hmm.
after by physical media people. Um, One of my little regrets before we even get into the movie is, so there used to be a period where when they were releasing physical media in the
Hmm.
early or in the late 90s and early 2000s, if you were an active person on the internet, the studios would announce like, okay, on, I don't know, June, the movie will come out on DVD, but in December there will be a special edition.
Hmm.
Like we knew in advance, like Tarzan, Dogma, like you don't have to buy the first edition if you want all the bonus features and all that. So I remember uh renting Dogma when it first came out just to show my parents as the single disc where it was just the movie and I think
Hmm.
like a trailer. And I waited for the special edition, which is great. I love it. It's two discs full of bonus features. My little regret in life is that I always wanted to buy the boring ass edition as well because of a weird perk that I'll get to in a moment, but I put it off for so long. And then I'm like, oh, I'll buy it used someday. And then they stopped making it. And now, good fucking
Right.
luck.
Right. Now it's $500 plus on eBay or what? Maybe not
Yeah.
that much, but still.
Just any copy of it is costs a lot now. Even if it's used, people still want it. So the
Yeah.
reason I wanted the basic edition, because in theory, why would you? Is because um they filmed on Super 35, which means they filmed it open matte, which means that you use the entire you're matting it on the monitors, and then the theaters are supposed to mat it on the screen, which means there's going to be information on the top and bottom that was never
Right.
meant to be seen. Your boom mics technically are part of the film frame, they're just not. So,
In frame.
in theory, the
Yeah.
cool thing was, so studios used to do this a lot, where to cut corners, sometimes instead of doing pan and scan, they would just dump the full open mat onto VHS or DVD.
Hmm.
So the full screen side of Dogma is the full open mat, which I just found fascinating because
Oh.
every once in a while, and I'll never forget, this is the main reason I wanted to get it. When God comes out and she's all upset
Yeah.
because, you know, uh, Metatron kind of wipes Bartleby juice onto her dress and she goes, ah, and then she like rips it off into a whole new outfit.
Yeah.
In the pan and scan version, you could see like the hand of the guy holding this cord, and you see him like yank it, and it like helps rip her costume. And I'm like,
Oh, nice.
oh, I love that kind of shit. Like, we're not supposed to see that.
Right.
I
Well,
always, yeah, I wish
go
I had
ahead.
it. No, I just wish
Yeah.
I had it. I love that kind of shit because we're the generation that grew up with Pee-wee's Big Adventure
I
on
was just about
VHS,
to say that. I was just about to talk about the
pulling the
chains
chains,
coming up from underneath the thing.
and also when he's driving and he's sleepy, the
You can see the
signs you can
tracks.
see the track. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Have you done a you've had to have done a movies worth talking about on Pee-wee's Big Adventure, right?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I call dibs.
Oh shit. Okay.
I call dibs. I don't care who else is out there. I will fight them.
Oh, that could be its own episode.
That could be. I think it's also it might be an interesting point to cover at the top here about why the reason behind why Dogma is so hard to get a hold of now and why you
Oh,
can't find it anywhere. You can find it, you can watch it for free on YouTube in its entirety because of loopholes, I guess. But
oh, like parts
um
1 through 8. Like,
no,
or
I
is there's a full one? Okay.
there's a full 2 hour version on YouTube. That's what I watched because I don't have it. Or I do have it. It's I think you sent me a download of it, but then I think when my hard
Wasn't me.
drive oh, wasn't you? Who
No.
sent that to
I'm
me?
so physical media. I don't know how to send you a download of anything.
Okay, well that's fair. Somebody sent me a download of it, but then my hard drive crashed a few years back and it got corrupted, so I don't have it anymore. But fortunately, it is available in its entirety on YouTube, um, at the full 2 hours and 8 minutes or whatever. And that's what I watched it on this week. And then rewatched it today in preparation for this episode. But it's not, you can't get a new, it's out of print on
It's out
DVD
of
or any
print,
physical media, and it's not
and
streaming anywhere.
and well, and there's two reasons for that. One is that the like there was in that period where like there was no contracts made in 1999 for streaming,
Right.
and those contracts are held up because it's owned by Harvey Weinstein.
Oh
And
my.
yeah, and without getting too much into the trivia of it, like Kevin Smith, I think it was like last year, tried to buy the rights from Harvey Weinstein, and he offered like X amount of money, and they said no. He's like, well, how about? And he pulled some friends together, like, let's go in and offer X millions of dollars
Mhm.
just so that the movie I made can belong to me because it's not on physical media. And Sony's not making it anymore, and Harvey has the rights, and there are no streaming. It's unavailable. It's all locked up in Harvey. And even when he pulled together as much money as he could, Harvey was like, nah. He's like, all
Which
right, I tried. Like, you're rotting in jail. You could just maybe do the right thing here and just sell me back my movie. But nope.
it seems like such a petty thing to do. Like, is it not to defend anybody, but is it even Harvey or is it just his company? Either way, it sucks.
Yeah.
But but it's like, this is an incredible film, I think. And a lot of people do. And it's sitting there. He wants to make a sequel. I don't think he even has the rights to make a sequel to it because he doesn't own the rights to the original.
I think, well, first of all, it's so complicated. This movie's whole lifespan is fucked. I don't know if you remember. This was originally a Miramax movie, so it was Disney money.
Right.
Then Disney got scared of it,
Right.
and then they offloaded it in Lionsgate, like a newly like pre-Saw, like I think technically pre-American Psycho, because like remember the old Lionsgate logo was just like a little lion going, meh. Like,
Right.
like that Lionsgate bought the theatrical distribution rights. So it went from Miramax to Lionsgate, but also Lionsgate doesn't have home video at the time. So then Sony had the home video distribution rights. So there's already like hot potato, hot potato, hot potato.
Right.
And now it's, I don't know if it's technically owned by the Weinstein Company or Harvey Weinstein himself, but that's the fourth hot potato, you know. And as far as the sequel goes, I don't, I know at one point Kevin Smith had a sequel that he's like, we can never make it because it addressed Muslim concepts into the story. And he's like, I don't know if we can make a comedy, and I don't know if anyone would want to make that comedy.
Ooh, yeah.
But if he ever had a sequel like now, the one thing I took away from this most recent viewing is that, so many things like from Clerks Lawrence chasing Amy kind of bleed into Strike Back, and going forward into Clerks 2 and Clerks 3, there's recurring characters and callbacks. But aside from like referring to God herself in a later movie and the presence of movies and everything,
Right.
like Bethany gave birth to like the new Christ child, and it's out there somewhere. And I feel like there's a story you could tell if you really wanted to.
Absolutely. You know, the new last Scion.
Right.
And
Who would be in her early 20s.
yeah, by now, yeah, she'd be about 24 or 25 years old.
Yeah.
And I think when I went to the screening of Jay and Silent Bob Reboot or Clerks 2, I went to screenings for both of those. But somebody asked Kevin at the Q&A about Dogma and the sequel to Dogma, and he talked about the whole situation. And I did not hear about the storyline of involving Islam, but
that was a long time ago.
Okay.
Like,
but
whereas now I think the subject came up and there was like an idea for it too. In fact, I think this is part of Harvey's shitty, like Harvey called Kevin one day. He was like, "Hey, you think we could ever do a Dogma 2?" He's like, "Oh, yeah. Oh, okay." And then he found out that he was just calling everybody he knew to see if they picked up the phone or if, they'd already, because this is like right before the dam was about to burst.
Right.
So he's like, he didn't want to do a Dogma 2. He just wanted to know if I was had heard and was still on his side or not,
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. But yeah, I think even without any potential Islam, like there is still a very Catholic Dogma 2 that you could tell.
Absolutely. I think so. Especially with the storyline of the new last Scion, and the Linda, what's her name, who played Bethany?
Linda
Fiorentino. I guess she's retired from acting. She hasn't done it in over a decade, but
you're right. Like I haven't seen her in ages.
Yeah. I looked her up because I knew kind of where everybody else in the movie was at, but I was like, why haven't I seen her in forever? But I guess she hasn't really done any, entertainment work in, I think, since the aughts, since like 2008, 2009, something like that.
I mean, you could tell the story just without her.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing I was going to say. You don't necessarily need the Bethany character in it to make a good story for a sequel. And I think, it's just the whole Harvey Weinstein not giving the rights back to Kevin Smith, or not giving Kevin Smith the rights to his own story, is just super petty and shitty, and I don't like it, and I just want the world to know and be angry with me. I think that's what I wanted out of this opening conversation.
Well, especially because you're not alone. Like the fact that the DVD is so sought after, and the fact that fans always ask, can you put it out on DVD again? That fans ask, what about a Dogma 2? Like the interest is there. And maybe I wonder if that's why Harvey's like, yeah, there is interest there. So no, it's mine.
Right.
But if I sell it, then I don't get any of that sweet, streaming money. I don't get that sweet new 4K money.
He doesn't get it anyway. He's in prison. Like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's just the pinnacle of delusion. I don't know. It probably is. That guy's a piece of shit. I'll just say.
Fuck him. He's a piece of shit and rot. So for not just for the Dogma, for all his actual crimes,
for everything. No, this is the tertiary or less to everything else. That being said, I do want to talk about what an amazing film Dogma is, why it deserves to be in print, why it deserves to have a sequel, and once again, just wax poetic alongside you on the brilliance of Kevin Smith. And also to preface this by saying, I am a person who grew up, I'm a man of faith. I grew up with a faith background, not Catholic, but I grew up with a faith background. I still have a strong belief system. I am a man of faith. And I have also academically studied faith. I don't know if I'd call myself a theologian. I do have, knocked my camera there. What do I have here? I have Houston Smith's World's Religions. I've got a copy of the Quran. You already saw my Bible, so I'm all about the actual faith application of a belief system, or an idea system,
Mm,
well. And I'm also all about the studying of the mythos, and the academic study of the history of it. So I that's the reason this movie holds a special place for me, because I, as a person of faith, fucking love this movie.
nice.
I, I understand the idea behind protest, and Kevin Smith made this raunchy comedy basically about Catholicism or Christian faith or whatever you want to call it. And 99.9% of the time when people get up in arms about that kind of stuff, they didn't see the movie.
Right. Certainly
Uh
not enough to know that it's not a denouncement or have anything to say against religion.
no.
It simply has dick and fart jokes in it, therefore it's offensive because, well, the Buddy Christ this and 13th Apostle that, and but I'm like, yeah, but what's actually being told and
Yeah.
what's actually being said is nothing that's a knock against anything.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think, for me, Kevin Smith's dogma theologically is sound in its interpretation of
Well,
of the spiritual aspect of God and who God is, Um,
well, it was written and directed by a man who at that time believed.
mhm.
So that's the other thing people would get so upset. It's like, no, he this is still his religion.
Yeah.
It's but he just also has the sense to know that you can still write this story and have fun with it and not get upset
Yeah.
about it. Hence that disclaimer in the beginning, like,
Yeah.
this is all just meant to be in good humor, and that chances are God has a sense of humor as well. And
Right.
like there's a story that Kevin talked about when he had Carlin on the set, and Carlin was like, Kevin, he's like, this is good script, but you don't believe all this shit though, do you? He's like, no, yeah, I absolutely do. He's like, oh, Kevin, come on. Like,
Famously an atheist,
yeah,
George Carlin.
famously an atheist. And at the time, famously, Kevin was not. And this is written from that perspective. And I don't see how you could see this. And I mean, you can get offended about a poop monster all you want, but I don't
Right.
think you can get offended by any kind of, you know, in that
Yeah.
same, I don't know, I'm not going to go off on a big of a side tangent, but I'll never forget like when the movie Saved came out, which is a movie I fucking love. But I love that I could talk to people who could say, oh my God, I love Saved. I'm a Christian. And I think, the way that movie, what it has to say is great. I know people who are like, oh man, that movie was great. It made fun of Christians and it took down religion. I'm like, you all saw the same movie and came out with completely different
Yeah.
responses.
And I'm one
Uh,
of those who's like a Christian who loved that movie because it was designed as like, I think a lot, maybe we need more of them, like a tongue-in-cheek satire taking down the hubris and what's the word? The hypocrisy
mhm.
that's found in religion, and particularly because we're in America, and it's a very heavily a lot of the population is very heavily part of the evangelical church. We need that, man. We need to turn that light on ourselves and say, and be able to laugh at ourselves and be
Mhm.
able to say, hey, what does this really mean?
And
You
learn
know?
from that laughter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's right. We do take all this money. We don't give it to the poor. We just build mega churches. Oh, we do. And then through
Uh,
that laughter, then maybe you
Maybe
grow.
you learn
Yeah.
something, but who
Well,
knows?
yeah. Well, both of those, like, it's weird that, we're like, when I think of Saved, I think of that scene where they're not letting like the gay kid into the dance.
Hmm.
And it all comes down to that guy going like, if God wanted us to all be the same, then why did he make us all different?
Hmm.
And when I think of Dogma, I just think of like when you boil it down to it's serendipity saying it's that you have faith.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
Yeah.
And to me, there's a lot to be said about this movie. You described how you are currently a man of faith. I, on the other hand, am not, but I grew up going to Catholic school and
Hmm.
for several years. And even though I don't currently believe in anything, I always like the idea of having faith in something. I think it's a beautiful concept, and maybe one day I'll find something. But that's what really sticks to me in this is this idea that, like, as far as humanity, your hearts are in the right place and looking to something, but your heads have got to.
Yeah.
The worst thing. I mean, it's in the text that, like, they took a really great idea and then built a fucking structure on it, and a
Right.
structure that can lead to this, can lead to that. Plenty has been said about all the wars that have been fought and the
Hmm.
damage that has been done. But if you strip all that away, there is a really nice idea in there. If we could
Hmm.
just follow the heart and not the head, you know.
Yep. No,
It's a
I
beautiful
agree.
idea while still having dick and fart jokes.
I have got nothing against dick and fart jokes.
Oh, I love them.
Um, yeah, but no, I think one of the reasons I love this, well, no, I know one of the reasons I love this movie so much is because it 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 gives me a chance to look at it through the lens of saying, like, this is talking about in part my belief system. Like I said, I'm not Catholic, so there's certain doctrines of Catholicism that I'm just, you know, and I think the movie kind of addresses that, where they talk about exactly what you just said. We took this idea and built this structure on top of it. Um, but just being able to pick out, because Kevin Smith knows his stuff. He wasn't just a Catholic. He was like, he went to Catholic school, he learned all this stuff. So
Mhm.
he has it's like, the musical The Book of Mormon, where the guys grew up alongside Mormons. They knew all the in jokes, they knew all the inside information, so they were able to work that into the show. And in the same way, I think Kevin Smith, of course, I think this came before Book of Mormon, obviously.
Oh yeah.
And Kevin worked a lot of, like, interesting, intricate stuff into using actual dogmatic doctrine and mixing it with mythos and storytelling to if you've read or if you've learned about this kind of stuff, you notice these things. And there's not really anything that's, like, hidden.
No.
It's all pretty well kind of explained, but um if it's the type of thing that you've learned about or studied, it kind of makes it that much tastier in a sense, as far as the comedy and the storytelling goes. Poop demons.
Well, no, but like, there's, I don't want to call them deep cuts, but like prior to this, I'd never heard of plenary indulgence,
Yeah, I
and
hadn't either.
yeah. Aside from tackling, just bigger ideas of, uh, Jesus not being white, you know, I spent my whole childhood praying to the Virgin Mary. It's like, no, no, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. She was a virgin when she gave birth to Jesus. We never said anything about her being a virgin for the whole entirety of her
Right.
life, but we still call her the Virgin Mary. These are things, but then there's, again, things that, I still forget the line, but like the last word of Matthew to whatever, that whatever you hold true on earth, I'll hold true in heaven. Like all these, even in Catholic school, I don't know half of this shit because Kevin
Yeah,
really, I don't want to say deep dives, but yeah.
he does.
But it's
And
because
like
of these little footnotes. It's
yeah,
literally what the title of the movie is
right.
dogmatic law and structure.
And that's the funny thing. And just to kind of tack on to what you were saying, the coming from a non-Catholic Christian perspective, none of us, like James, I believe James was one of the apostles, was Jesus's brother from Mary and Joseph. Like, legitimately, like, it's talked about in the Bible. Like, I don't know where they were just like, nope, we're not gonna. I mean, I suppose that's a big thing. Nope, we're not gonna address that. Uh, but yeah, it's, James, the brother of Jesus, is a real thing. Um, so yeah, he had brothers and sisters. We have, I think we have documentation of it in some sort of historical. I don't. I haven't studied that, but
I haven't read it, but yeah.
yeah, I know it exists. There is some sort of documentation about, um, whether it's biblical or outside of the Bible and some sort of historic thing. But yeah, Mary and Joseph had kids after Jesus. So that's spot on as far as I'm concerned. With Chris Rock's telling Bethany on the train.
Yeah. And to me, I haven't read it, but I'm sure there was a 13th apostle named Rufus. That's spot on to me.
That's correct. That's
Yeah.
absolutely correct. There was.
But that's the fun comedy of the movies. We are allowed to have fun with the idea of a 13th apostle named Rufus.
Yeah. I don't know, speaking to specifically people that are offended by that idea, I don't know how that changes anything. You know, like there were 13 apostles instead of 12. My faith is ruined.
But yeah, so besides some of the smaller things, there's bigger, like my dad growing up, like he studied to be a priest, so he always,
Really?
So yeah, he quit before he became a priest. But whenever people would like refer to someone dying and becoming an angel, my dad would always quietly be like, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
It's like angels are angels and people are people. Like it's a
Right.
different thing. Like it's a whole different species.
Yeah.
He's like, when you die, you don't become an angel. And I loved it in this movie. Like it is very much like, look, we were made first. We don't have any genitalia. Like we don't have free will. Like we are a completely different thing. I'm like, that's cool. That my dad told me that. So
yeah. No, I think that's the concept of we become angels when we get to, when we die. That's there's I'll tell you this, there's nothing in scripture that supports that idea. So that's the other side of it, and this is totally off, but our current idea of what hell is in modern theology, mythology, whatever you want to call it, is not biblical. It's essentially completely inspired by Dante's Inferno. The Bible doesn't really, at least the New Testament, and not really the Old Testament, but there's very few cases in the scriptures that actually address what hell is like, other than it's separation from God, it's eternal, it's unpleasant to say the least. But apart from that, most of the fire and brimstone and pitchforks and all that kind of stuff, that's completely inspired by Dante's Inferno.
Are the different layers, the different circles, is that from the Bible though?
No, I think that's from Dante's Inferno,
as well.
Yeah.
Is the pit, because Azrael simply referring to like escaping the pit, going back to the pit.
That is biblical. It is referred to as the pit. Yeah.
And it's, as far as I always kind of understood, it's just like black absence of anything except for like pain and anguish. And
that sounds more like what you would glean from reading the biblical texts. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate though that there is no one with a pitchfork and horns in this.
Yeah. I mean, Azrael does have very small horns.
Yeah. But that's just to identify that he's a fucking demon. Like,
right. I'm a fucking demon.
They don't even really. It's impressive that for they never ever once do clouds in a sky and pearly gates.
Yeah.
I mean, they do have angels with wings, but I like that even underneath their Hugo Boss jackets, they have like armor. Like it's very ancient and I mean, if you wanted to get, it's a movie, so we have actors and they're humans and they have wings. But if you want to get like quote unquote accurate, I mean, as far as I remember, like when people saw an angel in the Bible, like they were scared. They didn't understand what they were fucking looking at. There was like eyes and like it was a terrifying thing to behold and something they couldn't even understand. And
I think
you can't have two of these sort of like Cthulhu creatures walking around. Yeah, okay, it's Ben Affleck and Matt Damon.
Yeah, and when we get to those, I love the memes that are like, "Hey, it's Christmas time for the biblically accurate angel Christmas cookies," and it's like the wheel with the fucking eyes all over it and everything. And I think that's from the Old Testament, in the book of Ezekiel, I want to say. But
Ezekiel
it's all
25:17, the path of the righteous.
oh, it
Sorry,
might be. Oh yeah.
I'm just going Pulp Fiction on you.
Well, see, that's another movie. Have you done an episode on that one?
Nope.
That's so good. I won't necessarily call dibs on it, but I'll throw my name in the hat. Um, but there's also the concept of like if you see something that's let's just say from another dimension.
Okay.
Let's just say if God exists, if the afterlife exists, if paradise of heaven exists, it exists on a different plane, another dimension,
Mhm.
essentially. If you see something coming and appearing to you from another dimension, there is not going to be one thing that you're going to be able to understand about what you're seeing. And so you're going to describe it as best you can. And that description probably won't do it any justice. Now, this is my theory
Mhm.
that, the wheel with the eyes and blah, 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 and seven wings or whatever it says, um, that's probably just somebody trying to scribble down the best way to describe what they saw and couldn't comprehend. So, but like I said, I love that as a description of an angel and people coming in and being like, this is what they're supposed to look like.
And can I just chime in,
Sure.
especially from my perspective, and not to discredit what you're saying, but like, I don't think that occurs and then Ezekiel immediately writes it down. This is something where
Right.
it was told
Sure.
verbally for years before. So sometimes things get embellished and embellished,
Yeah.
and then the pen comes to paper and it becomes a wheel with all these eyes and
Yeah.
you
Well,
know
and that's a good point too, because for those tribes of people that were living back then during that time, it was all oral tradition.
exactly.
Waka waka. No, but it was, and it was, you're absolutely correct. It was years later before pen went to paper or quill or whatever. Um, and so that's also a wrinkle to it. You've got, let's layer them both together. You've got somebody who witnessed something from another dimension, trying to explain it, passed down through generations, then finally being written down. That's the world's longest game of telephone. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah.
Purple monkey dishwasher.
But yeah, I like that you mentioned dimension too. Again, as someone who looks at it all as concepts, I've always, not to take something that people believe in and refer to it as, at least in this movie, mythology, but
Sure.
as far as story, what interests me, I always like the idea of it being another plane, another dimension that we just aren't privy to, that kind of exists concurrently with our own, and not someone's up there or someone's down there. But like, have you ever seen Constantine, the Keanu Reeves movie?
Yeah. I love
When he,
Constantine.
when he like literally like just was it Papa Midnight, when he like switches over to hell, and it's just our world. It's just the filter shifts into
Right.
the hell version of our existence.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's dope. I like the
Yeah.
idea of that.
And while that Constantine movie, not accurate to the comic series it's based
No,
on,
it's a pretty dope movie on its own
very
terms.
good.
Yeah.
And are they talking about a sequel?
Yeah, they announced that development's happening on it, but it's been, I
Yeah.
feel like, a year or so since that was announced. But yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it takes a while for these things to get moving. But I like that, Keanu never really went away, but he's kind of having this renaissance now. I like
Yeah.
seeing these guys like Michael Keaton and Keanu Reeves having these renaissances for the last, half decade or more.
Hmm. McConaughey had his own there for a bit post
That's true.
Wolf of Wall Street, for a little,
Yeah.
the and the Dallas Buyers Club, the Keanu-sance, the McConaissance. There's always these. I can't.
The key
Whatever.
the Keatonissance. I don't know. Keatonissance.
Uh,
Um,
but no, I have a feeling we might still keep deviating into biblical this, biblical that.
absolutely.
But also the movie itself. I'm going to just steer it back to let's say
Please.
we're because he wrote this. I mean, when you look at Clerk, there was a fun thing. It was always like James Bond will return, Thor will return. I don't know if you ever watched the end credits of his movies, but there was always two fun things. It was all the thank yous,
Mm-hmm.
these individual people that you could read, and they're usually pretty funny or sweet. And then it would always say, like Jay and Silent Bob will return in uh and Clerks ended with Jay and Silent Bob will return in Dogma
Mm.
in 1994. And from what I understand, I think he wrote Dogma first, but
Oh.
but they were both scripts that he wrote in his early 20s, and then we pivoted to Mallrats, and then he had something personal to say with Chasing Amy, and now
Mm-hmm.
also Dogma's slightly bigger story, so I have to build to it as far as skill and all that. But this it pardon me.
You are pardoned. You can get into heaven.
Yay! I walked through the pearly gates. No, they the thing I find interesting about this movie is that Clerks, Mallrats, and Chasing Amy are all relatively small stories with small stakes. They're personal stakes.
Yeah.
It's Renee dumped me, and I'm having a hard time admitting I want to get back together with her. It's always a guy and his bullshit that he needs to get over, something he
Mm-hmm.
needs to unlearn. And this movie, it's the first time I ever felt like, yes, it sounds like a Kevin Smith movie, and yes, it has the humor of a Kevin Smith movie, but Clerks, Mallrats, and Chasing Amy all had such smaller stakes, and they were personal relationship stories. Even Mallrats is a relationship story. Two
Mm-hmm.
relationship stories, actually.
Yeah.
This is the first one that feels what I would call plotty,
Okay.
where
Yeah.
I mean, he still has something thematically personal to say, but Clerks and Chasing Amy all had something really personal. And even though it's plotty, it still feels small.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll admit to you, when Dogma first came out, I didn't love it, but I grew to love it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things is that when you're talking about heaven, hell, and angels, and the last Scion, I couldn't help but thinking, but this all feels so small. But
Intimate, I believe
yes,
is the word.
but it's here's the thing that I grew to really like is that I'm like, yeah, but that's what Kevin Smith does. So in a weird way, it's fitting that we are telling a bigger story, but that it still feels intimate. That's a feature, not a bug. And the smart writing. Asriel's whole speech at the end explains how, like, well, a little incantation kept me off the radar, and
Mm-hmm.
so like the angels, because of this, the angels didn't know where God went, and they had to be really sneaky to get Stygian and triplets, and the Golgotha, like Asriel had to do the work to make sure that only X amount of stuff is happening to not make it so big and so noticeable so he could get away with it all.
Right.
So that's just crafty writing.
Yeah.
You wrote a way to justify your story being smaller. Because I will
Yeah.
tell you this up front. Um, I the script for Dogma leaked online like a long time before the movie like came out, and I read it. I don't even know if it was fully cast yet. But the second it was online, I'm like, oh, not only did I download it, but like I sat the second I was downloading and just started reading it, and I just sat for like 3 hours and read the whole script. And the problem with that is I read it the way I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have angels flying and people in a poop monster and uh the jarring thing for me was when I saw Dogma for the first time, I'm like, well, this isn't how I imagined it.
Right.
And just in your head it's an infinite budget, right? Whereas in
Yeah.
reality it's, well, the first Kevin Smith movie to ever have CGI, so we've got a shot of Bartleby flying in the
Bartleby.
sky, Bartleby, and then we have the cool shot of him coming down but we don't, there isn't him sweeping and flying through the streets and picking people up. There's a lot that's again, what I've grown to like is the ambition and then the execution of how can we tell this story and tell these beats within this amount of budget and this amount of space,
Right.
or in this amount of time that we're shooting for the day. And I think
Yeah.
it's very effective. in giving you seemingly so much, but within a smaller kind of restriction.
Mm-hmm.
But it took me a while to kind of get over the fact that it wasn't what I initially wanted.
Well,
It was
yeah, and
great. It
there's
was great reading the script, but like it was also a fucking huge mistake to
yeah.
read it in advance.
Well, there's a few factors to that. When people talk about like people who grew up reading the Harry Potter books, not that we read them anymore, but because J.K. Rowling's a turf and can rot. Um, did that was that too much of a statement? Because I know we did the Harvey Weinstein thing earlier. I just don't want to get booted.
I'll say it
Uh,
again. Trans women are women.
Trans women are women.
Hot
Uh,
take.
Hot take. Wow. Like real
Yeah.
going out on a limb there.
Yeah.
Um but, uh yeah. People read the Harry Potter books and then saw the movies. Some every once in a while there's people that are like, "Oh, I didn't care for it because they left this out, they left that out, they changed this, it didn't look like I thought it was going to." There's always going to be that. When you are exposed to the story before the feature film comes out, I always used to make the joke after I went and saw Passion of the Christ in the theater. People were like, "How was it?" I was like, "The book was better." Like it's a fun joke to make, right? But uh and then on top of that, if you find, because you can find the screenplays for a ton of different movies online at various resources. You just have to Google it. Not everything, obviously, but you look at the screenplays, the original written scripts for a lot of these movies that you know and love, and you start reading through it and you're like, there's all kinds of shit in here that's not in the movie. And so I'm curious if when you read the Dogma script, was there a lot of stuff in that script that leaked that wasn't in the actual film?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But what's great is if you've ever seen the special edition DVD or the Blu-ray, is most of those things they filmed and they're under deleted scenes. It is some of the most fruitful deleted scenes I've seen for a movie.
Oh, wow.
Um, a lot of it, like I don't remember the specifics. I just remember that when Rufus is sitting around the fire explaining to Bethany about Virgin Mary and the brothers and sisters,
Hmm.
there was a lot more just biblical talk, or I think at movies too. Like there's a lot more about the apostles, about I mean, there's already plenty of what I would call Bible talk in the movie, but there was just more
Right.
of it.
Yeah.
And then there's, I mean, one of the biggest changes I could tell you, and again, deleted scene, it's all there for you to watch, is that the ending with, well, not the ending, but when Bethany goes to unplug Bud Court and release God, uh, originally, the Golgothan shows up again, like to stop them, and Silent Bob is going to fight the Golgothan. She goes in and unplugs the thing. Silent Bob is like running towards Golgothan. Golgothan's running towards him. And then when God is kind of released, it's just like light.
Hmm.
The whole like digital door exploding and her
Yeah.
getting hit by lightning was not in it. When God's released, it turns the Golgothan into flowers. Like it's the same shape, but he's a pretty flower monster.
I feel like I've seen this image
Sounds like you
and I
might have,
didn't and
yeah.
I didn't know where it came from. I didn't know where it's
You might have watched the bonus features fucking 24 years ago, and
possible.
um,
So I used to own Dogma on VHS. I
nice.
never owned it on DVD. Um,
Maybe you saw it on YouTube or something,
Maybe I saw it on YouTube,
or
or I
just
think I
saw an image on Google one day.
yeah, I think in my mind it's a still image. So I think I might have seen it pop up on a website or something that I was on.
But the
Um,
biggest change is after that, one of the Stygian triplets, like his face is all melted and gross, and he shows up at the hospital and stabs Bethany,
mm,
and then Silent Bob has to kill the Stygian triplet. It's a whole huge sequence that I remember when the first time I saw the movie, I could even see. I'm like, oh, you changed stuff, because I remember I knew she gets stabbed by one of the triplets, and instead, when you could tell, it's like, well, what are we going to do now? I don't know. What if when God comes out, lightning comes out, and we have a shot of her falling? What if we show the lightning bolt hitting her?
right.
And it always sat weird with me for a long time. Now I just don't give a fuck. But when I was like, 22 or whatever, Silent Bob's carrying Bethany. I'm like, why would God in all of his infinite allow his lightning to hit and kill her? Like,
Right.
now I get older, I'm like, I don't know, it's a sacrifice and she has to come back. Like, there's a precedent for this in the Bible, right? Jesus
Sure.
knew he was going to die and come back. So whatever, but that's a fix. Same thing with like originally, since they cut out the whole fight, they're like, well, let's make the door explode and we'll make it a whole lightning exploding
Yeah.
thing. So that's
Did they
probably
did they film the whole scene with the Golgothan
yeah.
turning into flowers and everything?
It's
Okay,
in the
yeah.
deleted scenes, man. It's all there.
Dang. I got to
But
come
yeah,
over sometime and watch this.
but there's a lot. I mean, almost every scene that you could think of where people are sitting and talking about God and stuff, there's just a longer version of it.
Hmm.
There's more Rufus. There's more Bartleby and Loki. Trying to think of anything else that really. The tiniest little thing, but it made all the difference to me. Was there's a brief explanation when they're at movies, where the first thing she asks Rufus is, "So who the fuck are these three kids trying to kill me?" He's like, "Oh, there's Stygian triplets. There's these kids that were on Earth, and I think they killed a baby. Like
Mm.
they were just absolute monsters. They killed a baby, and then on their way to prison, they got hit by a bus and died or something." But knowing that, I always had like a precedent for like, okay, so there's these three like little fucking Jeffrey Dahmers that got out of hell. Like I
Right.
knew who they were. That explanation is missing from the movie. So like
Yeah.
within the context of the movie, you're like, who the fuck are these like three kids on rollerblades? Like what is
Yeah.
who? And I always in my head knew, but the movie's not telling you.
Right.
And if you had that information, it doesn't really alter anything, but at least it doesn't make them feel so random.
Yeah, because they do feel kind of random.
They do.
But I also kind of accepted it knowing Kevin Smith's obsession with hockey,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm just like, well, of course there are hockey stick wielding evil minions on rollerblades. Like we get the hockey for like right off the bat in
Yep.
Clerks, basically. So
Yeah,
uh
there's definitely a wacky sense of like, well, okay, if you told someone the story of like, well, the voice of God comes and he puts this girl on a path and the blah blah, but then you're like, okay, but the demons are kids dressed as little hockey players. Oh, okay, and there's a rubber poo monster. You go, oh, okay, like we put the bells and whistles of something a little bit sillier to it.
yeah.
Oh, I can tell you the biggest difference.
Ah,
The biggest difference, if I remember correctly, and I haven't read it in fucking 25, 26 years. If I remember correctly, don't quote me, but this is the experience I went on, was that like as you didn't see Azrael. Like the woman opened her door and like someone came in and the Stygian triplets are like in the living room talking to like a shadowy figure.
mhm.
And then later in the movie, Azrael appears to Bartleby and Loki. Then they leave and go to a toy store and talk. But when I was reading it, Azrael was just a friend who was helping them out. Because in the scene, it's the same scene. He's still playing his intentions like, hey guys, look out. They're sending the last sign after you. You have to travel incognito and stuff. I'm like, oh, thank you, friend. We know when we watch it that he's playing them.
Yeah.
When I read it, you didn't. And then it's a reveal in the bar
Okay.
that Azrael is behind it all. And you're like, wait, what? So that's the first thing that really threw me for a loop when I watched it, is first scene off the bat, like, here's Azrael. And I'm like, oh, you're the bad guy. And the
Right.
movie's telling you he's the bad guy. They tell you right away. But originally it was played as like a mystery, like a question that the movie had to answer.
I wonder if they structured it that way just because, Jason Lee's so good, you didn't want to take him out of half the movie.
That's part of my thinking, is that if we have Jason Lee, let's maximize it.
Yeah.
And
Because he's
also,
great. I
and
love watching him.
when you watch the movie, you don't feel like you're like, this movie doesn't need a mystery. It doesn't need a shadowy figure. We're not losing anything.
Right.
You don't feel its absence. So yeah, no, absolutely. Let's have him wax beautifully poetically about fucking air conditioning.
Yeah.
Like, let's not lose that. Yeah.
And that was such a great little scene when, I mean, obviously they kill some poor housewife, but
Yeah.
but when he goes in and is just basking in the central air conditioning, and that was the whole point of him asking, I'm from the EPA and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And he goes into air conditioning. And I don't know about you, but I've never had little ribbons tied to my air conditioning vents. Like I
Yeah.
never grew up with that. I've seen it only in movies. I've never seen it in a
Only in
real
movies.
person's house.
It's a visual cue for the audience to go, oh, there's air flowing out of that vent. As
Yeah.
if we don't know when we see a vent that there's probably air coming out of it. But,
I'm sitting on the edge of my seat thinking to myself, is that vent on or off?
you know, it's a visual medium.
Yeah, it really is.
People would used to criticize, Kevin Smith for not moving the camera much. He's like, fuck you. I'm going to move the little air conditioning vent so you'll
Yep.
know.
Um,
But
and then, oh, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, let's talk about Janine Garofalo. She's not in this movie much.
Oh my God, but she's so good. Even just that little point of interest where Bethany's like, she's no man has ever been a man, even for 3 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
And she's got this like kind of like spill the tea kind of glee. Like that sounds a little militant. You think about joining the other side. That one sentence endears me to her whole character.
Yeah. And she's not in it very long. She's just in the first act tops, right?
That's it. Just the one scene. Yeah.
Is it just the one scene? She's not in more than one? Yeah, I guess so.
No, that's it. If anything, and again, that's like another scene where I think it's in deleted scenes. Like again, there's just more. Every scene just had more yap. I won't call back to everything I've ever heard in the commentary, but I did hear this commentary more than once. And this is back when Kevin Smith would kind of more openly talk about things that now I feel like he would be a little more tight-lipped. But he was very open about how Linda Fiorentino was a little difficult to work with. And in the commentary, when Janine Garofalo comes in, I forget who said it. It might have been, but like, should have put her as Bethany. And I know it's just like a joke and kind of a dig at Linda Fiorentino. But forget the dig. She actually would have been a really great Bethany.
She would have been.
She'd played the lead in movies before. She's great in Truth About Cats and Dogs. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to say missed opportunity, but that could have been good.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the other thing is, because she's actually Jewish in real life, isn't she?
I think so.
Although technically
Acting.
but technically with the descendancy storyline that they reveal in the third act, that could have worked too. But I was actually reading up on that when I mentioned earlier. I went online to see like whatever happened to Linda Fiorentino, and it addressed the comment that Kevin Smith made on the commentary, and they didn't talk for years. But I guess she did reach out to him after his heart attack, and they kind of made amends of sorts.
That's nice.
But Kevin did express regret of like, I was making a joke. I shouldn't have, she did great in the movie, but I shouldn't have said that on the commentary. And he was the way he was, and he is the way he is. I think he's matured, but all of us have done and said stupid stuff like that, and his just happened to be on the DVD commentary, which goes out to everyone.
Yeah, I can't remember who. I think it might have been Ben Affleck, but someone's like, whew, like burning bridges or something. But like they're acknowledging, like, all right, like, your words, not mine. Like, and he's especially in the podcast, his past 10 or 15 years, like he's made it very clear, like, I like to talk about things I like and not badmouth things I don't like. I just don't say the negative. And Kevin Smith now would never speak that way about Linda Fiorentino, but Kevin Smith back then, used to write essays about how he didn't like fucking Reese Witherspoon, and it was like tell all little posts on View Askew, and that's while we're talking about Linda Fiorentino, I can't say what it's like to work with her. There are a lot of scenes that I really like her in, but there are some other scenes. The thing about her that's interesting is she has such like a smoky presence. And I think it's in movies like Jade, it really works. Even in Men in Black, the fact that there's something kind of off about her when she works in the morgue. And there are times where like she's a little that kind of sultry tone. It almost is at odds with what the text is asking of her. But I'd say about 80% of the time, I think she's really firing. And there are other times where I'm like, you're almost too smoky for this. Is that weird to say?
Well, I admit I'm watching this movie being like, Linda Fiorentino, fine. Like She kind of a smoke show.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah. Did you not
Well,
understand me when I said fine?
oh yeah. Yeah. I
She
just
she fine.
yeah. I just think, but there was a kind of a sultry is overused, but there's like a smoky
Yeah.
sort of kind of if she came into my detective agency talking about her dead husband, I'm like, oh, well, you did
Right.
it. You clearly did it. You're the killer.
Clearly.
Yeah. And then you're gonna try to kill me by the end of this story.
Yeah.
Like
I think it works though, and this is just this is coming back on the back end to justify something. But with her being, scorned by the church and having a grudge with God and that sort of thing, sometimes that works in some of the scenes. When I thought, I was watching it, I'm like, I know I'm watching a Kevin Smith movie, but there's some really good acting in this, you
absolutely.
know. Of course, they've got great actors for a lot of the roles, and some of the roles are not that great, but or some of the performances are not that great. But I thought she held her own as the lead.
Oh, dude, when
Uh,
she is flooded with this overwhelming amount of information about her destiny and the blood that flows through her brains and her veins, and she's going into the lake and
yeah,
when Metatron shows up and just it's after the yelling, it's the coming down and the quiver and like the why and like
yeah,
and the fact that I mean the two of them and just the tone Alan Rickman takes.
yeah,
It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie is just him explaining how I had to tell this like 12-year-old boy and
yeah.
he asked me to take it all away and I'll tell you something I never told anyone. If I could,
If I could, I would have.
I would
Yeah.
have. Yeah. It's great stuff.
Um, and that's the scene that comes to mind when I'm talking about her performance in the movie, like the running out into the lake, splashing, the screaming, and then the uh, what's the word I'm looking for? The falling action or so,
Mhm.
or the revelation of Metatron and that. Um, and he's walking on the water, which is a great visual. That was really
Yeah.
fun. Um,
So great.
But yeah, no, that's a great scene. And, I think it's also important. We're jumping all over the place, obviously, as far as story goes, but we, if you're talking about this is a story about the potential of an apocalypse because angels are defying God, et cetera, and it's written by Kevin Smith, and he's, heavily educated in Catholicism, and he's writing it from that perspective. How the hell are you going to drop Jay and Silent Bob into this story? And it's so good. They're just so good in this, and I need a beanie that says Snoogans on it.
They still make it.
Do
They
they still
start.
make it?
They
Okay, that's
started.
good to know.
They started making it when this came out, but you can still get it. I think on the Stash website.
Yeah. I do want to, they have a Buddy Christ figurine on the
I
website.
have one. I've
I
actually had
haven't,
I've had two in my lifetime because the first one was in my car for years and faded. I had to buy a second one.
oh shoot. Well, I want to get one. I want to put it next to my Clerks the cartoon signed lunchbox. Um, I think
Nice.
I think you were there when I got that. Maybe you weren't.
Mm-mm.
I got it at one of the screenings. Um,
Oh, if you got it at Clerks 3, then yeah.
it might have been Clerks 3. It was either Clerks 3 or Jay and Silent Bob reboot, but I can't
Oh
remember
yeah, it might
which
have been
one
reboot
because
because
they
we
were
were at
both at the
both.
same theater.
Yeah.
Um, because did I went to one of them with Bree, and then didn't you and I go to the other one, or did
Yeah,
I
we
go?
we were at reboot together. Like we didn't go together, but
We
we were
came
there at the same time.
separately, but we were
You and
there.
I went to Clerks 3.
That's right. Okay. Um, so I think I might have gotten the lunchbox. This is totally side quest. I think I got the lunchbox at reboot, but you stood in line with me. Does that sound right?
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's about right. Yeah.
um,
But Jay and Silent Bob, yeah. Interesting in that it's kind of one of the things that makes this movie feel so wacky is that you have these kind of characters in this kind of story.
mhm,
What I find the most interesting thing about it, at least from the way I nitpick and chew apart these movies,
mhm.
is not nitpick, but I'm because I'm revisiting all these movies this year and for
Yeah.
each episode, and it's funny to see Jay in each movie has an actual like evolution. It,
Yes.
he is. incredibly young and like aggressive in Clerks. He's
Hmm.
threatening strangers on the street for looking at him. He is like when he's berating Dante to a just with you know foul language and vitriol. He is a cartoon character in Mallrats. He really kind of pokes Silent Bob a lot in Chasing Amy. It's like a
Hmm.
bitter married couple, just how much he's just shit talking Silent Bob the whole time. And then Dogma takes a turn in that he is more so than other movies, super horny all the time. Like that's the note.
Yeah.
Is like, how can I get blown or fucked? Is like
Yeah.
80% of his dialogue, and you see a little bit of that in Clerks. I'll always quote the line because it's a line that's starting the scene, but I don't care if she's my cousin or not. I'm gonna knock those boots again tonight. And I'm like, oh my god, this guy fucked his cousin. Like, so horny. Um, it's an interesting choice for this movie that like scene after scene after scene. Like the first time they're talking in the diner, a lot of it is how can I get you to fuck me?
Right.
So much so that again, as great as an actress as she is at playing the drama of things, she with 100% commitment is like, no one is fucking me. Do you got that? Like that yell really, really works because of the pure annoyance.
Yeah.
But I mean, even to the degree that like literally the world is ending and he's following up on that vague promise where,
Yeah.
but yeah, this movie, super horny Jay.
Yeah.
Interesting choice. And
And
that
I think,
it bleeds into a bit into Strike Back too.
yeah, and it does. And I was going to say, but Strike Back kind of meshes all those versions together,
Because
you
he's
know?
cartoony like in Mallrats. He's dunking on Silent Bob like in Chasing Amy. And then, hey baby, you ever asshole licked by a fat man in an overcoat
Yeah.
is something he could have said in Dogma.
Yeah. Um, and one thing that I realized on this most recent watch through is I had forgotten that Silent Bob doesn't really have his Silent Bob speech in this movie. He kind of generally has a wise speech in most of the movies. Um,
Yeah, this was just more of a gag,
yeah,
but a hell of a gag.
yeah,
I fucks with Last Crusade so hard. So when the
yeah.
no ticket happened,
No ticket.
killed.
Um, yeah, I think that he has two lines. There's no ticket, and there's
Thanks.
one other thing he says, but it's like a one word thing.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's at the end when he's like, and if you guys play your cards or whatever, I might put in a good word for you two as well. And Silent Bob's like, thanks.
Oh yeah, that's right. Um,
And originally he had one more, but it was cut. It's in the hospital scene.
oh, okay. I
Nothing
got you.
juicy, but before he, like Bethany kisses him on the face and is like, "Go distract the Golgothan," and he's just like, "Okay, sure."
Um, yeah, because like in Chasing Amy, he's got the titular monologue, um, which is one of my favorite monologues. I use it in
Mm-hmm.
my acting when I need to, present a monologue to somebody, which isn't that often, but um, and I can't remember. It's been a hot minute since I've watched Clerks, to be honest. So I can't remember. Does he have a big epic speech or something in
But he has
Clerks?
one epic sentence, and it's the sentence that knocks Dante and gets his head on straight because he's all about uh Caitlin, Caitlin, Caitlin.
Okay,
And
yeah.
it's like, no, but Jay's like, didn't I see fucking Veronica fucking bringing you food and fixing your tire and Silent Bob's like, there's a million fine looking women in this world, not all of them bringing lasagna at work. Walks away, and
Hmm.
Dante's like, holy shit, you're right. Which is,
Um,
see, to me, the thing is that originally the Jersey trilogy was like a trilogy. Dogma, even though it was in the Askewniverse, it was in Wisconsin, and
right.
it's not a Jersey movie. So I like to think that the payoff to the trilogy is Jay going, "What you think? Just because he says something is going to be the most important? Like we're poking fun at the important speech with also a very long monologue, and that was a
Right.
nice haha, we did 2 movies where he says a sentence. Now
Yeah.
he gets a big monologue, and that's the end of the trilogy. Here's this other movie that's not a Jersey movie. So now we can just have fun with it. He can just do no ticket, you know.
Yeah. Um,
Because you never know. Like when you're making, Mallrats and Chasing Amy, you don't know if you're ever going to get to Dogma. When you're making Dogma, you don't know you're doing Strike Back. When you're doing Strike
right.
Back and you think it's over, you don't know you're going to go back to the well many more times.
Yeah.
Uh, because I also like the big legality monologue in Strike Back.
Strike Back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I think you do.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think I've told you this story before, but for the sake of our storytelling on this program, I think I've told you that my first exposure to Kevin Smith films was Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. What did it come out in 2001?
Yes.
And I had never watched Clerks, Chasing Amy, Mallrats, Dogma. I'd never watched any of them. And we saw this trailer for this movie called Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and me and my buddy Matt were just like, "Yeah, let's go see this." And I think it was the first R-rated film I went and saw in the theater of legal age. Like I was 17.
Hmm.
Oh, in 2001 was I 17? Yeah. Yeah, I turned 17 in 2001. That's correct. And so
Good
I
job.
I I bought a I think I bought a ticket for it and we went in and saw it. And my buddy Matt and I just like we left the theater just cracking up and we didn't get any of the in jokes, the
Mm.
references to the other movies, but it was such a goofy ass movie with these characters. And then later I learned this was a whole series that had been going for a decade already. And then I went back and started renting them and watching them and Mallrats, then was one of my favorites because I liked the goofier ones. Dogma, I don't think. Yeah, I bought it on VHS. So, and then I had watched the cartoon series, like when it aired, which was in, I think, 99 or 2000, or was it later than that?
I think it was after Dogma and before Strike Back. I
Okay.
want to, if it was 99, it was late 99, but I think it might have been 2000.
Because I remember, I think I only saw 2 episodes of it. So maybe that was actually my first exposure to Jay and Silent Bob. But I don't think I made the connection because they were such separate entities at the time, in my mind at least. Um, and yeah, it was I don't know. I just the characters they're kind of the consistent connection through the whole universe. Obviously, you have the returning characters in Clerks 2 and Clerks 3 from the original. You have a few other recurring characters in each
But
film,
not
but
the same as them. Like they're the
yeah,
3PO and R2 of the
right,
OG trilogy. Like
right. And so and they're so stupid. And why does Bob keep hanging, why God, why am I still, what's Ben Affleck's speech in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back where he's like,
yeah, when Lord kind of like I ditched this
yeah,
witless chum and yeah.
yeah. Um, so, uh,
And then and I know this is a Dogma conversation and not a Strike Back, but you find out in the opening Strike Back that like as babies, like this is where they've been. That's our
yeah,
quick stop. Like they are tethered almost from birth.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, who's watching these babies? The little one's watching the fat one or whatever she says. Um, but they're such fun characters and it's such, obviously you're going to drop them into this movie because it's part of the Jersey trilogy or no, it's not part of the Jersey trilogy, but it's the next one
Yeah. The
and
Askewniverse. Yeah.
it's the next film of the Askewniverse and they've been like you said the R2 and 3PO of the series so and then making them prophets uh or were
And,
they?
and I absolutely think they were, but I do think that the if to quote things I've been told my whole life, the Lord works in mysterious ways. And if you think, why the fuck these two? It's like, hey,
Yeah.
it's beyond our comprehension.
And
It makes sense to God, not to us.
yeah. And they are the prophets, even though I think it's kind of a weak connection to be like Jay says something about make myself a prophet, and he's
Really,
talking
I think
about,
it's hilarious.
well, yeah, Profit, and then
Yeah,
that triggers her and she's like, but that's Prophet. I don't know.
phonetically, I'm fine with it. I just,
I'm
I,
just like,
you're
that's,
very literal with this. Yeah.
I know, that's how we're connecting it. Okay. But it's still great. And just the whole
Oh
point
my
of like,
gosh. Sorry, you're just making me think of like a whole Life of Brian scenario where there was two actual prophets that she was supposed to meet like around the corner, but she went with them instead.
we'll see. The thing is, at the end, Metatron sees them and he doesn't have any issue with it. So
Yeah.
I kind of assume, okay, they were the prophets he was talking about.
And the fact
Uh,
that when he's before that, when he's like, one of them will talk at great length,
yeah, at
whether you
great.
want to, I'm like, he knows.
Yeah. So that does all make sense to me, but I had that thought of like maybe she was supposed to meet somebody else and happened to run into Jay and Silent Bob, and then they still carried out the plan or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but uh yeah, they're great characters. They're a great connection through this whole multi-movie cinematic universe of the Askewniverse, and that's why you and I cosplay as them.
Yeah.
Feel
I
free
love
to
it.
throw up a picture of us in cosplay on this episode.
Now you're making me have to do work.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I might not.
We'll see.
I'm glad you're talking about Jay and Silent Bob because one of the things about this that my brain is weird. It
Sure.
remembers the dumbest shit your brain should not remember. I tend to remember when I saw a movie in theaters where the audience laughed or screamed at, and I will always remember that a lot of the times. And I remember I saw this a few times, but the first time I saw it was at the Lido Theater in Newport Beach, which I think isn't there anymore. But the cool thing about the Lido Theater was that it was like a single screen, really kind of ornate theater, and they always played independent and art house stuff. Like
Mhm.
if you want to see the latest Miramax movie or like Samuel Goldwyn like independent art house foreign stuff, that's where you went. They always had like, and since this was released by Lionsgate, who was doing like early indie stuff at the time. And since Kevin Smith came from the Chasing Amy Clerks background, they were playing this at that theater. Tended to have a lot of old people would come to it.
Hmm.
This is where you would go to see the piano. This is
Right.
where you go to see like Pedro Almodovar films or something.
This isn't the fucking piano.
Exactly. So I remember sitting in the theater watching this, and there was several elderly women littered all in front of me, and I'm like, before it started, I'm like, they're not gonna fucking like this. And sure enough, when Jay says, actually, no, before that, when she's like, "What are you doing at an abortion clinic?" He's like, "Well, I'm trying to pick up women." Like, what? It's like, we figure where else we, find loose women, unless they
Yeah.
like to fuck. Everyone just started to shuffle, and I could hear the audience going, "Whoa, oh." So by the time they're in the diner, and he says, "What about anal? Is it true that chicks fart when you blast them in the ass?" Someone audibly was like, "Oh," and
Oh
then like
God.
a beat or two later, he asked for sex or something. She says no, and he goes, "I'll take head." Someone was like, "Oh," and like got up and left.
Oh.
This was not the crowd for Jay.
No. No,
The
no.
blue haireds were not here for it, but that just made the movie better for me.
Right.
Anytime he said something about anal or blowjobs,
Oh man. Um,
but also a lot of the humor, like so much of the humor did work with that audience when she asks Metatron, like, "Oh, they were banished." She's like, "Where the hell?" He goes, "Worse, Wisconsin."
yeah,
Killed.
nice.
That's a joke you could tell your mom. You know what I mean? That's a
Oh
nice,
yeah.
clean, funny joke, and it
Yeah.
worked.
Well, and that's the thing. I think I don't want to say Kevin Smith shows his range, but it's like he knows comedy,
Hmm.
regardless of whether it's like Jay is the character that he is, and so he's going to be like that. He is the dirty dick and fuck jokes. And but there's also a lot of smart little one-liners like that. Um, and I'm trying to think of anything else uh that's like a biblically related joke that he made in there, and they're in there. I just can't think of it off the top of my head. And then Chris Rock comes in and he's doing the Jesus was a black man type of humor and keeping me down and that sort of thing. And I thought there was just a lot of great commentary on, you know, okay, let's go with the common exception of there wasn't a 13th apostle, but they added it for this movie and said he was a black man, he was written out of the Bible because he was black and all this kind of stuff. It's such good commentary on society and our
Hmm.
modern system, or at least the last few hundred years of history, of taking black people out of history where they belong, where they should be credited with things that they did, and they haven't been up until more recently, at least. Um, I think that's great. And then again, in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, they bring him back as basically the same character, not the same character, but basically the same character when he's directing the movie, and he goes on the whole rant about that too
A
with
far more
Jamie Kennedy.
aggressive version, but yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, very angry, aggressive version. And then, he's harassing Jamie Kennedy as the poor PA and all that kind of stuff. But
I mean, yeah, no,
um
through that, I don't want to say filter, but you're right, because the same thing could also be said for Serendipity and
hmm
her monologue about the misogynistic slant of the Bible
hmm
and how many things are the fault of women. I mean, and if you want to look at that as how it applies to the greater church, I'll tell you what a massive deal it was, and how many parents thought it was actually unacceptable that when I was going to Catholic school was when we started allowing altar girls and
Oh
not just altar boys. Somewhere I think around like sixth or seventh grade, and I know a lot of the girls were stoked to do it, but like there were some parents that are like, no, no, a girl doesn't get to handle the
be
fucking
involved.
wine and
Yeah,
cross the stage or whatever. Ours looked like a stage. They made it very stagey, but
sure.
yeah, and just over time, the certain allowances that like a man could take the Eucharist, but a woman couldn't handle it. She had to like stick her tongue out in the old
Right.
fashioned way, and
Well, and I know this wasn't for my parents, but my family comes from a more conservative background as you go back a couple generations. But I know that I think at least when my grandparents were young, and to be fair, I am a young child of old parents. Like my parents were 39 when I was born. So and then their parents, my mom was the youngest, and my dad was an only child, and his parents had him old. So my grandparents go back quite a ways as far as age. Um, and so I think it was when my grandparents were young, when they went to church, men sat on the right side of the sanctuary and women sat on the
oh,
left side of the sanctuary. So there's, and yeah, it's yeah, a lot of misogyny, a lot of stuff that's been added in there. I'm a person of the thought process that if you actually look at the scriptures, particularly in the New Testament, um, women are given a lot of tremendous power, at least morally and spiritually. Um, and it was, people talk about the Samaritan woman at the well, and Jesus tells her about herself, but then uh he also tasks her with being the person to go tell other people about him. He tasks her as a priest or a prophet. There are other women in the Bible that are given responsibility of leadership, in the New Testament again, particularly, but even in the Old Testament too. Um, and yet, in spite of that, because of the misogynistic nature of particularly Western culture, but any culture that was touched by the Christian movement of the last 2,000 years. Uh, just brush that under the rug and say, hey, you should be submissive. Anyway, Salma Hayek. I did
Well,
love when she comes up to Matt Damon and he's like, serendipity? Well, where'd the boobs come from? Can I? She's
yeah.
like, hold on.
Yeah, there's something I really like about how because she says I can't, I got myself a body. I like that there's something about angels and the dead and abstracts that even though they're in human or human looking forms, especially in Rufus's case, he is a human, he's just dead. But they can see beyond what we see. There's some
Mhm.
other special sight because we see even Rufus sees a stripper at a club, but eventually he's like, hey, like
Initially,
I don't know her actual outer form, but
right.
that's serendipity. And same thing
Yeah,
with Matt Damon. Like you look into her eyes and you're seeing something
right.
recognizable to him. I just like the way that plays out. It's got its own lore without
Yeah.
explaining the lore to you.
Yeah. And I like that. I like that with I think that's the thing of like the original Star Wars trilogy versus the prequels. I feel like in the original trilogy they just kind of let the lore be like it just was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they spoon fed us a lot in the prequels.
Well, that's half of the fun of the original trilogy is that it's supposed to be a serial that you've come into and you haven't
Yeah.
seen the previous reels. So half of the fun is the stuff that we're speaking of as past and as matter of fact. And we get to go, huh? It's
Yeah.
supposed to be exciting and kind of vague and mysterious. That's the fun of it.
You fought in the Clone Wars? The what?
Exactly. Precisely.
Um,
I'm glad you brought up it's a completely different context, but the idea of being submissive. Because I just
hmm,
one of the things that uh the movie touches upon that at least for someone like me, maybe, and I feel like someone like you might also appreciate that certain institutions, but the idea that like Loki's explaining to the boardroom, like, the problem is like, I think it's the boardroom. I don't think, but they're explaining the idea of like fear. Like none of you have anything to fear anymore.
that is the
And
boardroom.
yeah. And there is something to be said to me about, institutions that do say like, this is what you're supposed to do. This is how you're supposed to live your life in order to, maybe get a reward, but ultimately based on what level of power we're at, keep you in
Hmm.
line.
Hmm.
And to the degree that even when Loki's explaining, like the fear of some almighty father figure that's like, do it, and I'll fucking spank you,
Yeah.
But you are touching onto this idea, and it's interesting that it's coming from the mouth of an angel about the idea of like, no, we do use fear to keep you in line. And
Hmm.
right now you are not afraid. And in a very Old Testament way, let me show you some wrath, And I
Yeah.
just thought in that same way where you're speaking of something a little more modern, I'm not accusing all religions of doing this or anything, but you could certainly maybe see how some do, especially
Hmm.
throughout history or currently, however you want to view it. But that's an interesting thing to me for a person of faith to write this script and still kind of include that viewpoint.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing, and it is part of the I guess what you could call the perversion of it.
Hmm.
And you use fear to control. And that we've taken, I think, historically, as the Catholic Church grew, and then even after the Reformation, as other denominations came about, it's always been about, the biggest headline, I guess, is you don't want to go to hell.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big headline of Christian religion or mythology or whatever you want to call it. And my interpretation has always been, and I know this isn't a necessarily a theological discussion, but my interpretation has always been that hell is kind of the default. Like there's God and there's people, and God created people, but he gave them free will, and we use that to do our own thing. And hell isn't a place God made to punish us. It's simply the existence outside of God, you know, and um that would be torturous, or that would be um you know, eternal pain or whatever.
Mhm.
The idea of the religion, or the idea of faith, or the idea of ideas, um, as Rufus put it, ideas, um, is that God wants to reconnect with his creation. And so it is more of, it's not about, I don't want to go to hell. It's more of, I want to reconnect with my creator. And I feel like that's, like, I love the image of Alanis Morissette as God. Like, I don't, you know, and she comes out and she's kind and she's merciful and she's just cute, and she, you know, she knows all things, and she's pleased to see even Jay, who immediately says he wants to fuck her, and you know, and just knows, like, these are my creation. And then she goes and does a handstand next to a tree, and like,
Right.
I
And does like a
think,
little "Mwah."
yeah, the little boop. um and even with the killing of Bartleby, it's a
Oh,
mercy killing. He says thank you. I mean, it's the layers to that, the emotional layers to that are incredible. What were
well,
you gonna say?
you were talking about her. Like, to me, one of the best parts of that whole sequence is when he looks at her and just barely eke out, "I'm sorry." She
Hmm.
has this like understanding kind of wrinkle to her eyebrows, like,
Hmm.
and it's very parental. Like,
Hmm.
I believe you, and I see I see your regret.
Hmm.
I'm still gonna explode your chest, but like,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's forgiveness, but it is acceptance.
Yeah.
She got the message, and she I, before seeing this movie, I never would have guessed. Like, oh, okay. Like, not only could you be an actress, but that you could convey so much with no dialogue.
Yeah.
She's quite good.
um
And do you remember what a scandal it was? When they announced that her casting, and when the movie was coming out, people were protesting. They even
yeah.
saying, "This is that woman sang a song about going down on you in a theater, and she's playing God." The blowjob song girl is like, people were fucking pissed that Alanis Morissette was playing God. What a silly thing to be upset about.
Right. And I thought she nailed it. I thought it was great, you know. And the other thing is, like, when people get, and again, another thing that they address in the movie, when people are like, well, we always refer to God as he, and then Bethany starts referring to God as she.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a theology professor in college, that always referred to God basically in the third person. It's not he or her, or, you know, or his or hers. It was always God's.
Hmm.
Um, and quick side story: one time we were in chapel, because I went to uh, a very liberal, and progressive Christian liberal arts school. And so we still had chapel and all this stuff, but we were also a very progressive campus. And so we had, a lot of times we would have a chapel ceremony towards the end of the year where some seniors would get up and give a little talk or something, and then they'd choose like a hymn or something for us to sing. And there's an old hymn called "He Leadeth Me." And the chorus is, he leadeth me, by his own hand he leadeth me. Um, his faithful follower I shall be, by his own hand he leadeth me. And so this theology professor is in here, and I can hear her singing, and she's just replacing every gender denominator with God. So it's God leadeth me, by God's own hand God leadeth. And it just cracked me up, because that was a big emphasis, that she made. But yeah, that's when people talk about, oh, well, you know, God is a he. I just want to be like, really? Tell me about God's penis.
Well,
Like,
Adam was created in God's image.
yeah, But like, yeah, so tell me,
It's therefore penis.
give me details about God's penis and scrotum, please. I'd like to hear about it, since you're so insistent that God is a man and that a man is defined by having a penis. Tell me about God's penis. What's it look like? Does he have a big penis? Does he have a small penis? This has gone really weird, but I'm okay with it.
I'm loving it.
But yeah, that's
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
I'm loving it.
God's
But that's
dick.
the thing. And so that's another thing to call back to what we were talking about earlier with the, when Alan Rickman pulls down his pants and he's got, he's like a Ken doll. Uh, it cracks me up because I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? Um, I think my belief system surrounding the made in God's image argument is there's a pastor, I believe he's in Texas. He's called the Bishop T.D. Jakes. He always said, "You are creative because you were created by a creator," and that's what I believe being made in God's image means. Um, Not that God has a penis.
Mm.
But if anybody wants to message me about what they think about God's penis,
Hey, leave in
let
the
me know.
comments below what you think
Leave it
about.
in the comments below. We'll have a discussion
Ben wants to hear.
about the holy penis.
Well, I think there's a couple things about that I want to touch upon. One is I love the idea that, again, within the lore of this, and they don't have to explain it, but if God is a woman, so many of these characters that are from heaven still refer to him as he, and I still think it's like, no, but if we're all tethered to Catholic dogmatic structure, and if the verbiage on earth is he, then we also oblige, even though some of these characters have been in the presence of her, they still refer to him as he.
Yeah, well, in the opening conversation between Bartleby and Loki, he says, "Here's what I don't get about you. You know there's a guy. You've been in his presence." Yeah. And for the majority of it, until even Metatron, until uh until Bethany corrects him and says she, then he starts referring to her as she, but he puts a big emphasis on it. She and her.
I got scared for her. It's such a dumb little note, but when she's talking to Bartleby on the train, she's like, she's always watching. I'm like,
The
you're
first
referring
time
to
she
her?
says she.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, granted, if you're Bartleby, it just could be a slip of the tongue or whatever. But like, if he knew how much danger he was in at that moment, he could have really read that could have been a slip up for her, because he could
Yeah.
be like, well, how many people really know that God's a woman?
I mean, I almost got the same feeling as was it in Inglorious Bastards when he goes into the bar pretending to be a German and he orders
Yes.
drei Bier instead of
Instead of
drei
this. Yeah.
Bier? Because I took 4 years of German, 2 in high school and 2 in college. And one thing, I mean, we learned about the German culture as well. And so I knew you counted to 3, or you count starting with your thumb in German culture. So when he did that and they rack focus on his hand or whatever, and that's Michael Fassbender.
So you were already like ahead of the curve on that.
Yeah, when I saw that, and obviously they hesitate a moment on his hand to indicate that it's something to make note of, but I knew, and I was like, oh no. And I kind of got that same feeling when I was watching this scene again, and Beth starts talking about God as a she, talking to Bartleby, and she refers to her in the female several times in that conversation. And I mean, obviously I'd seen it before, so I didn't think, oh no, he's gonna catch on. But I did have that thought of like, oh man, that's that could have been bad.
It could have been, if you look at the narrow view of the movie, I get really scared for her, but also in the grand scheme of the world we live in, there are literally people who, like, there's bumper stickers, God is a woman. So like,
Right.
it would bounce right off Bartleby. Like,
Sure.
But I still get scared for her. I'm glad you brought up German, because again, I remember the dumbest shit. And especially when you're younger and you really allow yourself the energy to become a fanboy about certain things, there's outtake reels that like I could quote from Chasing Amy. They're not even the movie; they're just from like the outtakes
Hmm.
and stuff like that. So there's uh, I'll to the I say this probably to the day I die. I'll always remember this because it cracked me the fuck up, and I think about it every time I watch this movie. I don't know if you notice when Silent Bob puts his hands on Bartleby to throw him off the train. He says, "Schuler Bob."
Oh no, I missed that.
Go back and watch it. When he gets thrown off the train, he also goes, "I'll get you for the Schuler Bob." Kevin had
Shriba.
Kevin had told Ben Affleck that Silent Bob in German is Schuler Bob, which apparently, and you could probably tell me, is not true.
No, the as far as I can tell, it would mean schoolboy Bob or school Bob. Schule, I think, is school.
Well, there you go. So it's incorrect, but Ben Affleck took that and incorporated into like his logic was that, and again, he says it in the commentary, and I'll never like my brain. I remember commentaries
Right.
that like his justification was the angel's natural dialect was German. Like so in that moment he slips into his natural primal Germanic vocal and calls him Schulebub.
It's so stupid.
Yeah.
I love it. Um,
Yeah, it's fucking great. No, the other
you know,
thing I was gonna say about God and the she and you were talking before, the other thing was there's a takeaway that I had as a kid that I feel like is probably wrong. Maybe it's not, you tell me, but I think it's an actual story. Like we were wondering, does God have a name or is it just God? And we had to read something where someone asks God's name and God's response is, "Well, I am he who is called I am."
mhm.
So for the longest time, I always thought God's name was I am. And if you were to ask why, it's like,
Mm.
well, that's my name. I am. Like, well, what does that mean? Doesn't mean you don't understand it, but I am, I am. And we're okay.
Mhm.
Anyway, so the callback that Chris Rock throws in there, I was like, I understood that reference.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I think he touches on it that that's what he tells Moses. Um, I think from the burning
Oh, he
bush.
goes, he goes, it worked for Moses.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. Yeah. Um, I've always kind of interpreted it as the statement of I am is, I am the supreme being, so to speak, tell them I am sent you. Um, but of course, we also have so what we now take from it is that the name of God is Yahweh,
Mm-hmm.
which was misinterpreted a long time ago as Jehovah. Um, again, calling back to Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, Jehovah. But what was it in Greek or in Latin? Jehovah starts with a Y. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's because when writing it, they would never write out particularly in the Hebrew, I think they would never write out the full name of God because they felt like they would not, they couldn't write the full name. Like it would be blasphemous to write the entire
Mm.
name. So they would leave letters out. So you had basically like the equivalent of Y or J, V, and H. They would leave out the vowels essentially.
Mm.
So that's where Jehovah came from. And then I don't know the history that well on the etymology there, but then they eventually realized it's not Jehovah, it's Yahweh, Yahweh. Anyway,
Mm. You know more than me. Now,
I've said
is it the J pronounced with a Y or is it actually spelled with a Y?
I'm not sure.
Because one of the few takeaways I've managed to remember my whole life is that Jesus's name, like we've adapted it to Jesus, but if you want to like get technical, the more accurate Americanized or Anglo Englishified version would be Joshua, which was originally pronounced Yeshua.
Yeah.
And from
So
Yeshua we get Jesus, but more directly we get Joshua.
yeah, it
And
is
if you went back in time 2,000 years and met him, he'd probably say like, "Well, hello, my name is Yeshua,"
yeah.
is what I was told.
So yeah, Yeshua, from what I understand, that is also correct. I as I understood it, it was a derivative name from Joshua, but not technically the same name. But I
So
could be wrong.
derivative.
Yeah, exactly. Or it was a name that had advanced from that, because they would have been, the common language of that time would have been Aramaic, but they would have also been
Hmm.
speaking Hebrew. Um, the regional dialect, and then of course the Romans were speaking Latin. Um, so it's like, uh, well, it'd basically be like here in Southern California, the native language would have been Spanish,
Right.
or prior to that, other indigenous languages. But for purposes of this illustration, let's say Spanish, and then the Roman language is English, and then then, but of course, then we also have uh, uh, people who speak Hebrew. We have people who speak I mean, every language in the world, obviously. I live in a part of Los Angeles where it's like we've got Spanish, we've got I'm close to Koreatown, there's Korean,
Mhm.
all kinds of different
There's like
languages.
Hebrew neighborhoods.
A lot of Hebrew neighborhoods nearby,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's not uncommon to think of a major metropolitan area having multiple commonly spoken
Oh yeah,
languages. Um, but
especially
yeah,
with the Romans having such a big presence.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I'm not super educated on the etymology, but that's what I think I remember. But you're spot on with the Yeshua, Yeshua.
Yeah,
Um,
the first reason that ever came up is the idea was someone was talking about like how much they love Jesus and they wanted to name their kid like Jesus, and someone was like, "Well, actually, if you want to be more accurate, expressing your love of God, you should name your."
actually,
They did. They're like, "You should name your kid Joshua," and then they explained why. I was like, and I was just kind of going, "That's fucking interesting, man. That's all right,"
yeah.
and it stayed with me forever. um, uh, I want to talk about George Carlin for a minute
Let's talk about George Carlin.
because
I love it.
it's there's this little thing that happens in the movie, and I think it's such a smart choice, right? Which is that here's a guy who famously, like, the part is just the part,
Hmm.
but then you cast Carlin, and
Right.
just the casting and seeing him in the costume becomes the joke
Yeah.
before he even says a word. What I love is that when he takes the podium, he takes a beat for the audience to recognize and laugh. But what he's doing is he's looking at the crowd, takes a beat, gives him a little wave, and then starts. And in
Yeah.
taking that beat with the crowd, he's allowing the audience to laugh for a second, be like, "Ha, it's George Carlin dressed as a
Yeah.
priest." It's great. And it's almost as if to be like, hey, like, it works in the scene, but it's
Yeah.
also, look, it's me. Look at what
Yeah.
I'm wearing. Oh my gosh, let's go.
That's great. And that is one of, obviously he had different bits about it, but one of his bits where he's, from his stand-up where he talks about like, there is a God, and if you don't do what he says, he's going to punish you and send you to hell and blah, 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 but he loves you. There's that whole thing. And that, oddly enough, growing up, learning about my faith and reading the scripture and that sort of thing, and also parallel listening to people like George Carlin and other uh, comedians and, you know, non-comedian philosophers of other kinds, because I think comedians are a form of philosopher. Or oftentimes they can be, not all of them.
Yeah.
But that's also where I kind of come to this argument point of saying like, no, the whole point is not God made hell to punish people he doesn't like. It's the default of being separated from God. That's what hell is, not but at the same time, that's Carlin's commentary on the whole thing that we talked about with and the whole thing that the movie talks about of institutionalism perverting the
Yes.
idea or the message. So and that's
He had a
something
good
I'm
idea and then built a belief structure on it.
yeah. And that's one thing that I'm passionate about, because I know like my wife is a recovering Catholic. She uses that term for herself. She went to Catholic school as well. And it's uh, you know, it sucks to see something that I grew up with that I have a a good feeling towards. to be something that is traumatic to others. And I think that's one reason I love this movie so much, because it it is irreverent towards the institutionalism of religion while not being irreverent towards the idea of faith.
Hmm.
And that's one thing I just fucking love about it.
Between the setup of Chris Rock has a whole monologue on the train about all these ideas of faith, but then taking a good idea and building a structure on it and limiting the idea that it is going to evolve. When we get to the payoff at the end of the movie, when he's like, "Are you saying you believe?" She's like, "No, but I've got a good
Good
idea."
idea.
It's yeah, it everything you just said is absolutely correct. So, but I love that we start like to make that point. We still kind of have to be irreverent. We have to put this start this character at her lowest. So she is
Right.
upset with her maker by losing her husband because she can't have a kid.
Mhm.
But also, seeing the people outside of her job with these signs. But the one that really gets me is we see that shot where the audio is explaining John Doe Jersey, but the shot is the guy asleep in church, the guy listening to music, the kids
Mhm.
playing with their toys. And when she gets up to recite, just we believe in the God, the Father Almighty, the
Yeah.
greater, like, I didn't go to places where like a cool youth pastor in a sweater played a guitar and we all were like, fucking yeah, Jesus. Like,
Yeah.
I grew up going to a place where like the Eddie Izzard bit, hallelujah,
Mm.
hallelujah. Like,
Uh,
you know what the word actually means? So yeah, it's serendipity who to me hits the nail on the head. Like you don't celebrate your faith, you mourn it.
Mourn it. That's such a great line. That's
Yeah.
such a great line.
To view it as an obligation and an inconvenience is something that is very real for people. So to have
Mhm.
Bethany go there and where she ends up at the end,
Mhm.
it's beautiful. It's a beautiful little story.
Well, and it's a great, lead up because we don't know her history leading up to that point. We see her being born in church, and this was something that I wanted to ask you about because I was trying to listen, I couldn't quite pick it up. Is the music that the guy's listening to on his headphones, is that anything of significance? Because I couldn't pick out what it was, but I feel like if you turn it up, you might be able to hear, and I didn't know if it was like a callback to Berserker or something like that. But
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny you asked me that because for the last 24 years, I just never noted. And then yesterday I heard it and
yeah,
I could almost make out what it was, but I couldn't. But
yeah,
I'm sure yeah, I would love to find out. Yeah.
yeah. My
Because
request.
that'd be a freaking great callback.
It would be a great callback. I don't, as far as I heard, I didn't think it was Berserker, but it might have been something in reference to something else. Obviously, I would not put it past Kevin Smith to do that, but I just couldn't tell. And so I figured, hey, you're the Askewniverse Oracle. Let me ask you.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no idea. Sorry. I failed you in my oracleness this time.
Ugh, well, I've lost my faith.
uh,
Um,
Another thing about this movie that I find interesting as far as its domino effect in the future, it's a weird thing to keep, but I'm fine with it. I get it. It's just interesting is this is only your fourth movie. We're not looking at the future yet.
right.
Mubi is literally a golden calf.
Hmm.
If you know the Bible, we know the story of the golden calf and false idolatry and the fact that we are likening uh this idea of Mickey Mouse slash Ronald McDonald and the idea of contemporary false idols and the boardroom and their greed and their lack of fear and all that.
Hmm.
It's a very focused concept in this religious story we're telling.
Hmm.
And then it's funny to me that like, no, in all the other movies, we're just gonna have movies.
Yeah.
Are we making a point about false idolatry and the golden calf? No, we're just gonna keep movies. I go, oh, okay.
Um,
And it works. It's funny, but I mean, I think there might be some people who've forgotten. And you and I have gone to movies during the pandemic and
yep.
enjoyed their tasty burgers and stuff. But let us not forget that it was a point of satire, and we are making a statement with
Right.
movie The Golden Calf. Like
Because
it's so much more than just a funny place for the characters to eat and work in later movies.
right. Because and correct me if I'm wrong, but it didn't movies didn't exist until this film,
Correct.
correct? Yeah. Because I didn't remember it in the previous ones, but and also when Rufus gets his clothes, like he actually gets clothes,
Hmm.
was it just me or was he wearing a Mooby's uniform shirt?
Yeah,
Because
he
I could
is.
have sworn it was the purple shirt with the yellow collar, yeah?
Yeah. It
Okay.
there's a deleted, it's in the script, and it's a deleted scene where he dumpster dived and got. I mean, you look at that, like he doesn't have shoes and he's got like a hobo jacket. It's dirty.
Yeah.
Like he dug it out of a dumpster.
Yeah. And they're filthy. The clothes are filthy,
Yeah.
which I noticed in some of the wide shots at the end. I was like, "Oh, yeah, Rufus's clothes are really dirty."
Yeah. It's just, he gives the coat back to Silent Bob, but yeah, there's a whole explanation of where he got his clothes from. I will say though that unlike say some things where you have this version of the shirt and then later when we get into it more, there's a redesign like that. The movie shirt has always looked the way it did in Dogma. Like I'm pretty sure they started selling the movies shirt right after Dogma came out. So it's impressive that like they committed to that. I don't think they started selling the movie shirt when Clerks 2 came out. I'm pretty sure it's been that design this whole time. And
Yeah.
it's good design, but it's a good commitment to it also.
Yeah. And I think is it which one is it? Is it Clerks 3 or Jay and Silent Bob Reboot where Jay is wearing a Mooby's shirt? Or is it Clerks 2? No, it wouldn't be Clerks 2.
Yeah, Clerks 2, he's wearing a Buddy Christ
Right.
tank top. Well, in Strike Back, he's wearing a Quick Stop
Right.
shirt.
Maybe I'm just
Um,
confusing that because I had to make a Quick Stop shirt for the
mhm.
cosplay because they don't sell it.
Yeah.
No, they sell the new Quick Stop shirt, which
The
is the
Clerks
black
3
and yellow.
style. Yeah.
That's maybe I'm conflating a couple of different head canons.
Yeah, the movie's purple shirt has shown up a few times, but I don't think Jay's ever worn it.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah, he's worn the Quick Stop shirt, which is cut in the same style, and they've used that style for the first Quick Stop shirt and the Clerks 3 Quick Stop shirt.
Mhm.
Um uh
I think
yeah.
that's what I was thinking of because they both have yellow collars, and I was like, "Oh no, this I can't use this. I need the old Quick Stop shirt." And then maybe I imagined him wearing the new Quick Stop shirt. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Let's keep going.
But they do, yes, they both have yellow collars. Um
Good
I,
thing we figured that out.
oh yeah, very important. Another thing about the movie I just appreciate that at least I remember even reading the script like from the get-go, I was like, I already know I'm gonna like this, is that just the fact that it's called the Catholicism Wow campaign. Like as someone who grew up in the Catholic Church, just the idea of retiring the crucifix altogether and replacing it with something new, and also Catholicism. Wow, I'm like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
actually a point that, again, on a theological note, that I would agree with. Like, if the basis of your religion is that your savior was crucified and then came back to life, why is the symbol of your religion him dying? Like,
mhm.
and this is coming from me as a person of faith that, I've got problems with the crucifix and the cross in general, not theologically, but used as a symbol of the faith. Particularly because why do I want a bloody and broken deity? Like I get it. And it, it came to a really interesting point for me when I was watching the series. What was the series on Amazon with it was with Orlando Bloom and Cara Delevingne, and it was
Carnival Row.
Carnival Row. And in that particular universe, their deity was the martyr, and he had been hung. And so the religious symbols were of a guy hanging from a noose, and they were up all over the place. And I was like, yes, that's exactly, this is the symbol of this religion is a man mid-execution.
We should have a Buddy Christ.
I think so. I think the Buddy Christ is better than the crucifix personally. If I'm looking at it specifically from a theological perspective, the faith is based around a man who, yes, was crucified, but then came back to life. And that's kind of the point of the miraculous nature of the faith. Why are we sticking around on the cross? But that's my side tangent. I'll get off my soapbox.
How dare you? It's okay.
I love the Buddy Christ though. I love it. I think it's great. I mean, it's a bit cartoony, obviously. If you were gonna like suggest this as a real thing, maybe not that, but for the movie, it's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it hammers the point home. But yeah, you could have just like a nice, smiling, benevolent Jesus with like some light coming out behind his head, and there you
Sure.
go. Hey, that's nice. I kind of want to pivot to something I find interesting about all the Kevin Smith movies I've been watching lately, and
Hmm.
just the little signposts of like, oh, you're a product of your era, or
Hmm.
like, oh, that hasn't aged well. Sometimes it's just language, or sometimes it's little technical beats. And one thing, there's not a lot about this movie, but there is one that really strikes me, and and I get that it's Loki and he's the Old Testament, uh, the god who, the wrath, but this idea that they're on the bus and that, well, I can spot a lawbreaker, like a sinner.
Hmm.
They're doing the whole bit, and when you finally find out that the guy is committing adultery, he pulls out this giant gun and shoots a guy in the head, and then it's a comedy beat where the bus goes, "Arr!" And then
Yeah.
everyone runs for their lives, and I just remember watching this going, oh, remember when things weren't that bad in our country where you could make a joke about we
Yeah.
shot a guy and everyone's running for their lives. Isn't
Yeah.
this funny?
Isn't that hilarious?
Yeah, public shooting. Ha ha ha. Oh my god, like times have changed a bit.
Yeah. No, that I clocked that too. I didn't meditate on it as long as you did. I kind of was like, "Oh yeah," and then kept going with the scene, but now that you bring it up, that's a great point. Like, yeah, that's not really the only time you'd see that scene in a movie today is if it's a drama
Yeah.
and, they're illustrating a dramatic thing, not in a hilarious comedy where the bus
Yeah.
suddenly starts swerving all over the place.
Yeah, it's definitely the plot of some contemporary dramas, but there's a this is probably towards the end of that. But there was a period in the 80s and 90s where just like public violence was considered something you could joke about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll still never forget, and I think I've said it on a different episode for a different movie, but like the whole third act of Heathers, just like, hey, we're
Yeah.
just gonna kill a bunch of kids at a high school. We're gonna blow up a school.
Yeah.
Ha ha ha.
What year
I know it's a
did Heathers
satire.
come out? Yeah.
Oh God, 84, 86.
Yeah, because I think really, as I recall, I think Columbine was the first big,
Mhm.
like big
Nationwide.
nationwide covered mass shooting, school shooting type of deal.
Now there were
And I
technically other school shootings prior to that, but that felt like, again, maybe it's
yeah,
just the different age of media that we were in, or news
right.
information, or just the fact that it wasn't some outside force, but it was students.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was that was my senior year.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that was what,
It's 99.
97, 90. Oh, was it 99?
Mhm.
Okay.
And that
Um,
was the year Dogma came out.
yeah. So, and that was the turning point in our society, I think, as far as public, mass shootings go.
Mhm.
That's when it became a thing. And then all of a sudden school shootings were not to make too light of it, but
Right.
also like to use satire and comedy as a form of fucking dealing with shit. It's just like that's when it became the hot thing to do. School shootings. And then it just like now it's all over the place. Like everybody's doing it. And to be uh to be what's the word I'm thinking of? Uh Full disclosure, like it's a terrible thing. It's horrible. It's the worst thing ever. And I don't intend to make light of people's loss, but the whole concept of that it's become a common thing for a kid who, for whatever reason, is scorned or something to take a gun and shoot people at his or her school, pisses me off so much that I don't know what else to do other than to fucking poke fun at it, so to speak.
Mhm.
And that's where our society is. But back to your point, yeah, how much has society changed that was a gag
Yeah, an
in a
absolute
movie?
gag. The rhythm of it, all of it.
Yeah.
Also, you know what else has changed? It just clicked into me right now. This about 2 years later, this wouldn't be allowed anymore. In the beginning of the movie, you could just go to the airport, go through security without a ticket, and hang out at a terminal.
Right.
You only needed the ticket to get from the terminal to the plane.
Mm-hmm.
So people could hang out and watch people Bartleby and people watch all day and enjoy people hugging. Can't do that anymore.
Nope. Nope.
Anytime I see people like, you know, especially when your family's waiting for you to deplane and you could wait at the terminal for
Right.
your family to deplane. And now it's way the
Yeah.
fuck out there.
Well, it kind of, I always think of the whole DB Cooper thing. Because wasn't DB Cooper in the late 70s where you could just you know what I'm talking about? The DB Cooper case. You don't know DB Cooper, dude. Wikipedia DB Cooper.
You don't know LaForce's? They don't know LaForce's.
Then
I'll look up DB Cooper.
DB Cooper.
I know DB Sweeney.
No, not the same.
Okay.
But suffice to say, without spoiling anything, because I want you to read this and then I want you to text me after you read it. It's not a long article. But this might have been, I want to say, in the mid to late 70s. You could just walk into an airport and buy a ticket for a flight 20 minutes before the flight.
Oh, wow.
And walk onto the plane. You know, there was no metal detectors, there were no x-ray machines, there was no security, basically. But yeah, no, that's a good point. And it is interesting to see some of these things, you know, even watching a movie where somebody's on a cell phone and it's like this big and they're like talking on their cell phone like this. I'm like, oh yeah, they used to make them really small.
Really
Now we've got the freaking widescreens.
Do you know how cool Zach Morris was? Because he had one, the big Zach Morris brick. Yeah.
And that thing was a cinder block.
The size
Calling
of
it
your
a
head.
brick is generous.
Yeah. Speaking of the opening airport, there's this is probably one of my favorite Kevin Smith openings. I mean, I know you start with a disclaimer and then you go into do you go into the airport right away? No, we have John Doe Jersey getting the shit beaten out of him.
Yeah. And then it cuts to the airport.
Then we cut to the church. Talking about the Buddy Christ, and then we cut to a news report, and now we're at the airport.
And then we're at the airport. That's right. Okay.
But once we get to the airport, what I like about this movie is the way it sets the stage. Like there's something very classic screenwriting about how we introduce Loki, Bartleby, and then it's this mysterious thing that we're going to go home. We're going to go home, and then you find out, okay, they're angels. But by the time you get off that, you know, that little escalator thing for airports have to keep, you know, we've very clearly set the stage. Like, okay, these are angels. They were kicked out of heaven. They found a loophole. This one used to be violent. And now we're going to, and then when's this dedication? 3 days, get in the elevator. If I had a dick, I'd get laid. Well, I can do the next best thing. What? Kill people.
Spit take.
And then titles.
Not like, you.
And very like, I don't want to say like spooky, but very dramatic. Like, these are angels getting back into heaven. One of them's gonna kill people. Like, here's your story. And I just love the way it kind of sets the table. And the fact that even though it's an ensemble, it's Bartleby and Loki who get name cards, and Bethany who gets a name card, and Azrael. But not everyone gets it, just those four. But I like that no matter how many little plates this movie's spinning, it really is Bethany's on her path, Loki and Bartleby on their path, and we're all making our way to like the third act at the church, you know.
Right.
And then you could almost wonder, if you're paying attention to this sort of thing, well, why does Azrael get a nameplate? Well, I guess he's the villain. We know he's trying to stop her, but we don't totally understand why. But then I love that we get to the bar scene, and this
Mhm.
whole movie's kind of felt like Azrael's our villain. But then it kind of becomes, after the train sequence, no, in the final act, Bartleby's going to actually be the big heavy at the end.
Right.
And as much as I love Jason Lee's delivery of every speech in the bar, I really like, my favorite thing about this movie is and I think the actors do a good job of it, but it all starts with the script. This idea that you have two guys who have been with each other for eons. One of them takes pleasure in watching other people and sort of finding the little things in life. The other one's kind of a goofball, like within scene to scene, even when they're attacking movies, like Loki's kind of hyping it up and chewing gum, and he has fun with this sort of thing.
Yeah.
He's not quite Jay, but between the two of them, he is Jay.
Yeah.
But you have these two guys who, one is Old Testament wrath of God, the other one is this sort of thoughtful one who we know in the past talked him out of and had him throw down his flaming sword.
Mm-hmm.
That scene on the train where Bethany is confessing her purpose, and watch Affleck listen. He has very little dialogue, but he's processing all of it. I'll come back to that in a second. But all to say that I love that it flips. I love that Loki goes, holy shit, the last Scion's after us. Maybe we should fucking rethink this.
Mm-hmm.
And this horrible little switch is flipped in Bartleby. The first time he's held like a bottle to the neck of a human and realizing that parking lot scene. That's
the parking garage scene is so good.
So good. And it's impressive that you can just use one scene to show a complete 180 of a character and have it be believable. And it starts with the text, and the dialogue that Ben Affleck is given is fucking great.
Yeah.
But also the way Loki receives that information is also great. It's, in my opinion, it's the best scene in the movie.
Yeah. Well, and I totally agree. I want to touch on all those points. So first of all, the opening, not quite opening, but the scene in the airport at the beginning that you were talking about is so well done in its structure and writing, because I think all writers know that if you have more of a complex story to tell, but you don't want to spend a lot of time on the backstory to explain why the stakes are what they are, there is a challenge in figuring out how to get the exposition out there. And the great thing about this is, hold on one second. Okay. The great thing about this is we have this conversation between these two characters that gives us the entire backstory and the reasons why we need to understand what the stakes are, yet it does not feel forced or unnatural. It feels like a conversation between the two, even though these two guys have been together for literally thousands of years, and they're talking about something that happened thousands of years ago. It doesn't feel like it's crowbarred into
the
dialogue.
It doesn't feel over expository.
And then on top of that, as an actor myself, one of the most difficult things for an actor to do, both from the perspective of doing it well and from the perspective of being an actor and wanting to perform, is listening. And being able to just be basically still and listen and be captivating at the same time. That is not an easy skill. It can be learned, but it's not easy. And so, yes, absolutely, Affleck's scene on the train and him processing everything, that is difficult to do as a performer.
Honestly, I think it's maybe one of my favorite scenes I've ever seen Affleck play. And he does get some dialogue, but it even before he gets to that line, like he is taking in the gravity. Like it's not just hearing what she's saying, it's understanding what it means in a greater context and how
Mhm.
it's going to affect him. And as he's dealing with all of it, and then she manages to say, and stop, like how am I supposed to stop them? And the funny beat is, with the grabbing, it's this defeated and still trying to maintain, but understanding what it means for you. Maybe you're
Mhm.
supposed to kill them. It's one sentence and it has all the weight in the world, and
Mhm.
it's a hell of a performance.
And then on the third part was the scene in the parking garage after they get thrown off the train was yeah, it's a great and I think we tend to forget because Ben Affleck and Matt Damon have become so successful and done so much work and talking about them has kind of become a punchline that you can use however you want, either as Ben Affleck or oh you're a real Ben Affleck, or Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. These guys are good actors.
Mm-hmm.
They're good actors. Otherwise they wouldn't be where they are. And the layering of the biblical history and the mythos of Old Testament and New Testament theology of I've heard this before, or you
Mm-hmm.
sound that sounds familiar. You sound like the morning star. You sound just like Lucifer, and the stories and the mythology surrounding the origin of Satan or the devil, and that sort of thing, and pulling it into, this is how this happens, and yet these beings are supposed to be angels, yet they're still plagued by this emotional uh fear and vengeance and all this kind of stuff on top of being created to be the voice of God, or the message bringer, the one who brings the message of wrath and the one who actually exercises the wrath.
Mm-hmm.
um when you're saying that scene is the probably the best scene in the movie or whatever, I agree, and it's because there are all these layers to it, from the acting to the layers of mythology and theology, to Ben Affleck and Matt Damon just being captivating on
Mm-hmm.
screen. It's all there, and it's a fantastic scene. I was watching it earlier today and I was just like, yes.
There's a lot to chew on in it.
Yeah.
And unlike some other scenes, maybe there's maybe a start point and end point of two things to chew on. There's like you said, there's theologically things to chew on. There's emotional turning points for both characters, and there's the processing of like comparison. And like if I don't know, you can tell me if there is a precedent for this in the text. It's something I always sort of understood growing up. I don't know if I made it up, but I always got the impression that, like they say in that scene, angels were kind of created to be servants.
Mhm.
Humanity, one of the things that makes us different is the concept of free will. So I like, and you could tell me if that's accurate or not, but the way they
um
play it,
Yeah, as far
and
as
that
I know, that's pretty accurate to what I understand um, from, studying and that sort of thing.
I love the way Ben Affleck plays his absolute anger at the fact that we are given this free will and waste it,
Hmm.
and just the absence, like he's in his own hell essentially, his Wisconsin of the absence of God, and he feels it, and just everything they're playing, it's so good to the degree where once you are, not to sound too Star Warsy, once you go down that path and you're following through with, no, we're going through the church. I don't even care about going home anymore. This is just a middle finger at this point.
Right.
We're doing this, and he's forcing Loki to come with him. You have to set all these steps so that you can have a character after he gets his wings shot off look up at the sky and let out villainous maniacal laughter and have
Hmm.
it track with everything that came before. And we get
And
there.
and have it not be hokey and laughable. Like
Yeah.
this movie is a comedy, but that scene is not like you take it seriously when you're
Hmm.
watching it.
Well,
Uh,
also we take it seriously when, because if the writing and the acting wasn't there, when he's going up to drunk Loki and he's looking at him and he's like, you know what, you're not with me anymore.
you've lost
And
the faith.
you know what it's time to do, actually?
Stab.
Yeah. And it's kind of heartbreaking in a sense that they've been
It
together
is.
for this long, and now because of all this. But at the same time, the second he fucks, like when God comes out of the church, I also immediately understand all of Bartleby's regret.
Yeah.
Oh, I fucked up, and you know what? I am sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I know it's the parking garage scene, but I think it really that the turning point that I appreciate more and more is him in the train car listening to Bethany and
Mhm.
starting having a really good time. It's a little flirty, and
Yeah.
just it's not a rug pull. It's just slow. It's like quicksand, and it's
Yeah.
just all coming down, and then the gears start turning, and really great stuff.
Yeah. It's a good one.
This isn't even like a real note. I just think it's of all the little things that are said by Jay and Silent Bob, I find it adorable. And I'm using the word adorable here. I love that Jay refers to Silent Bob's coat as, dude, that thing's gonna be rubbing around inside your armor. I'm like,
Yeah.
aw, that's just fun.
It's his armor, man.
Especially when you consider how like in Mallrats and Strike Back, like pull it open and there's a Batman utility belt.
Right.
Like there is so much more to Silent Bob than we really see,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's all these years later. I every once in a while, like I just think of a coat as armor, and it just makes me chuckle. Um, Also, we haven't. I'm not without my notes, and if I had any two notes, and I don't take a lot of joy in being critical, but it's not being critical; it's just observing. A lot of great craft went into designing the Golgothan, and by the way, great voice casting with Ethan Suplee. Um, but it is and again, this is the charm. It's all about the limitations and working within them. But you have this guy who kind of stands there in the suit, and
Hmm.
his range of motion is kind of this.
Right.
And then we cut to like the CGI one, like throwing the poo, and the
Yeah.
fight happens off screen, and we cut back, and it's
Right.
just him standing there again. And
Yeah.
it leads to a great cartoon beat, which is I love the sound effects. Look over here, look over there,
Yeah.
look over there. You know, but I almost think that by having a giant rubber poo monster that can't really articulate too much in the shoulders forces you to do a really funny cartoon beat.
Right.
Um, so again, not really a complaint, but if I think if you had more money, you would probably do something that can you know move a bit more. But there's something
Sure.
about that giant silhouette. And again, we're playing with I want to call it literature, but text, biblical. Like, there's nothing in the Bible about a Golgothan, but we do know about Golgotha,
Right.
and these are the things that you can kind of play with. Like, well, yeah, you do lose your bowels, and a lot of people did die up on there.
Yeah.
Not just that day, a lot of people on different days all died. There could be a demon of poo. Why not?
Yeah. I think it's a great, apocryphal idea
Yeah.
of this isn't talked about in any of the accepted scriptures, at least, and but it makes sense that it might
It
exist. It might exist. Um,
so much so if you weren't doing a comedy, it is a pretty dark and graphic kind of metal thing
yeah,
to depict. If it wasn't a comedy, this I think he's actually like he just says no man or woman born shit into existence, but it is referred to as no man, which is also a hell of a name.
right.
Yeah.
Shit into existence.
I love that for a while there. We were getting Ethan Suplee, and even if he's not on screen, I like that he gets to show up in this.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
the other slight note I have, and it's more of a note than a complaint, um, because they also trim a lot of dialogue out, but there are a few times where the amount of text being used, I wonder if Kevin Smith was editing this movie now, if he would have tightened it further. Because I know as time has gone on, he edits his movies, and over time he's become more and more confident as him as an editor, so much so that like he edits as he writes, and on the day he knows what we don't need, and he just shoots what we know he needs to shoot. I remember there was like a 2 hour version of Clerks 3, and he's like, I got it down to 145. He's like, boo, I think I can get this to 90. And it's an inefficient 90-minute movie. I know that I think the 4:30 movie, which comes out later this year, I think he got down to under 90 minutes. There are scenes where, like, if the point of the scene is to be in a diner and get Bethany to meet these prophets and get them to give her a ride to New Jersey, if you look at the amount of minutes we're spending, you're like, oh, another blowjob joke. Oh, another sex joke.
Right.
Like this could have got to its point a little quicker. Rufus at movies, he explains why he's helping Bethany, but it does take several minutes to get there. However, even that's not a legitimate complaint, because much like Quentin Tarantino, when you come to a Kevin Smith movie, the reason you're supposed to be coming is for the dialogue, for the text,
right,
for the writing. Yeah. And it'd be foolish to complain. Just like I think it's foolish when people see Quentin Tarantino movies and go, there's so much fucking talking. I'm like, have you not paid attention to his career?
Right.
Have you only watched Kill Bill Volume 1? Like, do you not know this is what we're here for? And same thing with this. It's not so much that I'm complaining as so much as just observing that, like, oh, I wonder if Kevin Smith now would have let this scene go on the way it does.
If he edited it now. But it's also like filmmaking has changed
but
too.
It's so fun though. Like,
yeah, I agree.
Like, it's a joy to listen to Jay in the diner scene. But like, I wonder if like Kevin Smith now would have gone on so much about Shermer, Illinois, and we get that great Judd Nelson gag, but talking about the Breakfast Club and 16 Candles, it's funny for me. I wonder if Kevin Smith now would have just taken that bit out, all these little kind of
and he might have, but film editing has changed in the last 25 years as well. But I'm a dialogue junkie. I like it if it's good. I love Tarantino movies and I love Kevin Smith movies for that reason. But yeah, the Jay, the long bits where he's got a lot to talk about and says kind of the same thing over and over again. Yeah, I could see that going shorter, but it's also typical of his character. Alan Rickman says, and he will. At great, what does he say? At great length?
At great length, yeah.
So that's part of also the illustration of that aspect of his character. So, but no, I totally get where you're coming from on that.
Yeah. To me, the greatest example, and I'll tell you why I'm also okay with it. But when Metatron takes Bethany to the Mexican restaurant, he does this entire, it's all just him explaining who Loki is, who Bartleby is, and then one day when they were inebriated and he got him to, and ever since then we can't buy alcohol. And they were it's one of the only times in the Kevin Smith movie where I feel like, fucking show me, don't tell me.
Right.
Because, and you've experienced this as an actor, I have too. There's, essentially, forget tone. There's two kinds of monologues. Monologues where you're explaining, I went to a store the other day and I met this woman and then she said this and I said that, where you're describing what already happened, or a monologue in the moment. This is how I'm feeling, this is what I need from you, blah 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 blah. And Alan Rickman basically gets one long, so this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened, and any other filmmaker might cut to a flashback. The reason I'm kind of okay with it though is like, no, but this is what we're here for. And not only that, not only do we want that dialogue and we want this monologue, you get Alan fucking Rickman telling this story.
Right.
That's a gem. And
absolutely,
in any other time, or even modern Kevin Smith would be like, maybe we could trim this. Because I know he says that a lot. Like he's like, I'm working on a movie and I'm like, I can lose that. I can lose that. I can lose that. I love that. Here's the thing where it's like, you let Alan Rickman do Alan Rickman.
You let him talk, sir.
Absolutely. And he makes a very expository monologue.
Right.
Absolutely pop and work.
Yeah.
I am Bethany listening to all this going, oh,
Well,
wow.
and in with the juxtaposition of him drinking tequila and spitting it back in a glass and drinking and spitting, it's because that shows up before he even mentions it.
Yes. And if
And
you're paying attention, you go, hey, what's that about?
yeah,
And I love the way information is dolloped and it lets you, go on that ride with her. And but besides getting to do these big expository monologues, he also has all the sympathy in the world. Again, when he's standing on that lake, why didn't you tell me? He's like, would you have believed me? Like, but he's so sympathetic
yeah,
to her. I mean, he gets to play. I can't rave enough about him in this movie.
yeah,
Or this movie in general.
indeed.
Because to do something that tackles so many subjects, but to also be so silly, but to also make a point, and to also just understand comedy. Comedy 101, ready? Okay, but I get to drive. Brrr.
Yeah.
What gear are you in? Gear?
Gear.
And then there's a cherry on top because that's your joke. But then to
Yeah.
be, what do I know about shifting?
Yeah. Like I ever drove before.
Yeah.
Like
Rufus Falls,
Hmm.
Well, he was like, well, guys, I guess I'll just fall out of the sky,
Yeah.
Boom. Beautiful,
beautiful.
big titted naked women don't fall out of
Yeah.
the sky, Yeah. No, there is comedy kind of beats, almost vaudevillian at times,
Right.
as old as time. Yeah. Love it.
Love it. So, on a scale of 1 to, I don't know, 4.2, on a scale of 1 to 37,
Ah.
how would you rank Dogma?
Oh man, 1 to 37, that's fucked up because that's I don't know. 30?
37, man. Come on. No.
Well, no, because I mean, if you want me to be honest, like Chasing Amy's at 37.
Okay.
Kind
of has to be, I guess.
Well, I mean, Clerks was also at 37, but
okay.
Yeah, no. I do have a ranking in my head, and Dogma's towards the top, but they're about 4 or 5 above it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
What
not
about
an all
you?
pain. It's not an all painter three-way.
An all painter
An
3-way.
all painter three-way.
But especially for your background, do you rank it a little bit higher than me? I mean,
I do rank it up there. I think my top 3, just because I like the goofiness, are in no particular order: Strike Back, Mallrats, and Dogma. To take nothing away from the rest of the series, I love all of them dearly, but
wow. Yeah.
I love the goofy cartooniness of the other ones so much.
Yeah.
But again,
I like the cartoony, but my top 3 are completely different from your top 3. I go
yeah.
Chasing Amy, Clerks, Red State.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
And when I'm saying the series, I'm talking specifically about like the Jay and Silent Bob View Askewniverse film.
So not the Red
Specifically.
State, not the
Yeah.
Zack and Miri of it all.
Red State, Zack and Miri, Scream 3, those aren't.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I guess Scream 3 technically is.
Yeah.
Only because of that.
No, in my head now, because of that, the Scream universe and the Askewniverse are all one universe.
Exactly. They have to be, right?
Yeah. How could it not? So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I love doing this.
Yeah, it got really biblical, which was very educational for me, and I
there you go.
appreciate it. I appreciate
I
you giving me your time.
No problem. I hope I did it some justice, and I am not smote.
Yeah, we'll find out.
For distributing misinformation.
Yeah.
But yeah, and remember, we got to do a Pee-wee's Big Adventure show.
Yeah, you said it on camera, so I guess I'm committed.
You're committed now.
Shit. All right.
All right.
Until next time, thanks everybody for watching. And whatever, Ben, tell them where they can find you.
Oh, you can find me on social media, wherever you get your social media, at BenKliewer. That spells Ben Kliewer. Hard to spell, easy to say. You can also find me on The Con Guy podcast. We're on YouTube or wherever you get your audio podcasts. And I'm also developing a new podcast called The Geek Seat with Ben Kliewer. I'm going to have JC on as a guest at some point. Yeah, and then you can catch me on social, and I'm working on more stuff for the future. Hopefully you'll see me in more places.
Yeah. You heard it there. Thanks again, man. I'll see you later.
See you later, man. Bye.